Chapter 2489, Shedding Blood. Chapter 2489, Shedding Blood. Everyone was filled with anticipation and curiosity as the towering tree absorbed the final bits of energy from the land. Meanwhile, the purple light started to push over again. When the celestial fruit ripened, this piece of land would return to normal, rendering it unable to block the purple light. This also signified that the final battle was imminent. Everyone prepared to do battle. This celestial fruit was astoundingly large, so the power that it possessed was definitely as astonishing as could be. If a third heaven celestial king ingested it, would they directly break through? Meanwhile, the third heaven celestial kings were most eagerly anticipating the ability to break free from the shackles of the celestial path. They wanted to return to the celestial realm and break free from this cage. The celestial tree gathered the final drops of energy, funneling it into the celestial fruit. Its leaves wilted and fell, and immediately afterward, the trunk of the tree also started to wither. It was as if it had experienced hundreds of years in an instant. However, the celestial fruit became increasingly radiant, with numerous symbols appearing on its skin. There were paramount symbols that even the third heaven celestial kings couldn't fathom. In fact, after a while, they couldn't even see these symbols anymore. All they could see was an expanse of celestial light and regulations. However, right at this moment, all of the celestial light suddenly vanished, returning to the gigantic fruit. It then exploded outward again, forcing everyone to cover their eyes. However, this celestial light vanished as quickly as it had appeared. Only the celestial fruit remained silently standing. Celestial chi rose from its cracked skin, yet this aura was no longer overwhelming. Everyone could see it clearly. At this moment, the transference portal beside them also lit up, with numerous symbols pulsating on its surface. This signified that it was now possible to leave the celestial path. Seniors, lords, I have no intention of fighting for these treasures, and I simply want to use this transference portal to leave. Please allow me through, a celestial king said. He was naturally a newly advanced celestial king, and he clasped his hands in respect to everyone around him. There were far too many elites present, so if they mistook his actions as wanting to fight for the celestial fruit, they might resolutely blast him to pieces without a single word. I'm also in the same boat. Please allow me through, another celestial king said. Since he had already broken through, the flawless celestial seed was naturally useless to him even if it were placed before him. Moreover, he wasn't especially strong, so he couldn't possibly obtain any benefits here, either. If he stayed, he would only invite death. Following their lead, at least 100 or so celestial kings expressed a similar sentiment. Combined together, their power could roughly rival that of a third heaven celestial king. Thus, when their numbers reached a certain limit, they became fearless as they confidently strode forward, making their way toward the transference portal. They wanted no part in the imminent battle. None of the third heaven celestial kings stepped forward to stop them. Firstly, it would be pointless. Secondly, this was indeed a powerful force. Moreover, they had no understanding of this celestial fruit, so who knew what it might suddenly do? However, just as the newly advanced celestial kings were about to reach the transference portal, whoosh! A burst of devastating killing intent suddenly swept over, ruthlessly slashing at them. Damn it! The celestial kings roared in anger. They had already expressed their disinterest in fighting for the celestial fruit, so why had a powerful celestial king still attacked them? They all turned around to counterattack. With 100 or so of them attacking in unison, even third heaven celestial kings would have to treat their strength seriously. The killing intent was unstoppable as it swept across them. Pa, 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 pa. Blood sprayed through the air as numerous celestial kings dropped to the ground. Everyone was astounded. Which powerful celestial king had attacked them? Why were they so unreasonable? These people had already expressed their simple desire to leave, so why was this person still obstructing them? In fact, they had even launched such a deadly attack. However, Ling Han, Hua Furong, Ji Wuming, the 9th Descent Celestial King, and the others all frowned upon seeing this. This was because none of them had launched an attack. In fact, none of the second heaven or third heaven celestial kings had launched an attack. Then who had done this? They all turned to look at the celestial fruit. Just then, it was the celestial light surrounding this fruit that had unleashed the powerful killing intent, attacking those celestial kings. A dozen or so celestial kings had been killed as a result. Bloody rain fell from heaven and earth, permeating the area with a feeling of grief. The heavens were also expressing sorrow at the death of so many celestial kings. However, the fresh blood on the ground formed a small stream that flowed toward the celestial fruit. The humanoid celestial fruit was embedded in the ground, with its 2 feet reaching into the earth like roots as it absorbed the celestial king blood. Its speed was astonishing, and it wasn't long before the blood lost its vitality, transforming into sanguine stains on the ground. This was a shocking turn of events. This was simply a celestial fruit, yet it had actually managed to unleash such a petrifying attack. In fact, it had even managed to kill celestial kings. Not only that, but it had even absorbed their blood essence as if it were a gluttonous immortal beast. One had to realize that the combined blood of these celestial kings contained a terrifying amount of power. In fact, even third heaven celestial kings wouldn't dare to absorb all of this blood in a single gulp. If they did, they would be shattered into pieces even if they weren't killed. What's the meaning of this? Do we look like pushovers? Some of the celestial kings roared at the third heaven celestial kings. They wore grave and furious expressions. Many of them had 7th heaven, 8th heaven, or even 9th heaven celestial kings behind them, yet they had now been attacked by measly 3rd heaven celestial kings, with a dozen or so of them even being killed. Moreover, they could have very well been killed as well. At this moment, their rage erupted like a volcano. Some 3rd heaven celestial kings felt it beneath them to explain, yet there were still some who offered an explanation, saying, "It wasn't us who attacked. Rather, it was that celestial fruit." "What?" the newly advanced celestial kings exclaimed in astonishment. How was this possible? Even though celestial medicines belonged to a lofty level, and even though they were especially skilled at fleeing, they were definitely not known for their offensive abilities, much less an ability to kill celestial kings. "That's right," many of the third heaven celestial kings said as they nodded in agreement. Even though they were fearless, they had no intentions of shouldering this accusation for no reason at all. Even though it was beneath them to explain, since it had already come to this, they were naturally willing to express their attitude. Seeing so many third heaven celestial kings refute their involvement with the attack, the newly advanced celestial kings also started to feel some hesitation. Perhaps that celestial fruit was truly powerful enough to kill celestial kings? Was it still a celestial fruit? It was clearly a demonic fruit. Everyone stared at the gigantic fruit. After absorbing the celestial king blood, they could now see a sheen of red on the skin of the fruit. It was as if it possessed a sanguine glow. Peng, peng, peng. There was the rhythmic beat of drums, and it was as if something were about to hatch. The celestial kings involuntarily put up their guard. They were extremely careful, and they were ready to respond at any moment. Just then, a dozen or so celestial kings had been mercilessly killed. If the celestial fruit underwent some kind of transformation again, might it become even more wild and ferocious? Ling Han furrowed his brows. The more he listened, the more the thumping sound appeared like a heartbeat. However, how could the fruit of a plant have a heartbeat? Yet, looking at the shape of the fruit, it was clearly in the form of a human. Thus, it was seemingly acceptable that it genuinely possessed a heartbeat. After all, would you look? Light pulsated on the chest of the fruit, and its skin also rose and fell with the rhythmic beat. Was this not the beating of a heart? The atmosphere was extremely tense and muted at this moment, and it was as if a wild storm were about to arrive. Even though it was tranquil now, this was the calm that could invite a ferocious storm at any moment. Crack, crack, crack. The skin of the fruit continued to crack, with these cracks growing larger and larger. Moreover, it was as if an orb of light were being nurtured inside the fruit, with this light becoming increasingly dazzling as the skin of the fruit continued to split open. No matter where they looked, all they could see was an expanse of dazzling light. However, everyone was aware that the final and most significant transformation was occurring. The celestial king blood had been the final ingredient. After completing this step, the celestial fruit would finally reach maturity. Chapter 2490 Celestial Fruit. Killer. Chapter 2490 Celestial Fruit. Killer. Pa. The skin of the fruit completely split apart, unleashing a blinding radiance that forced everyone to shut their eyes. Ling Han also involuntarily shut his eyes. However, his divine sense remained lively. After reaching his height, he already possessed an instinctive ability to sense danger. At this moment, he suddenly noticed a threatening aura soar over, and he immediately reacted without even looking, clenching his fists and throwing a punch as he activated his profound body art. Peng! There was a heavy thud as a dull pain shot down his arm. It was as if his bones were about to shatter, and he involuntarily stumbled several steps back. His blood was seething, and he felt as terrible as could be. Fortunately, he had kept the Empress, Hu Niu, and bewitching Maiden Ru behind him, so he didn't need to worry about their safety. He was completely shocked at this moment. One had to realize that with the power of his body art, the might of his fist could reach the peak stage of the third heaven. However, he had actually suffered such pain that it was as if his fist were about to split apart. Moreover, it felt as if his blood were about to spurt from his body. Just how powerful was his opponent? Had he punched a block of divine metal? Wang. The divine demon sword materialized in his hand. He refused to believe that he couldn't rival his opponent with a celestial tool. However, agonized wails pierced the air around him, and it was evident that the mysterious assailant hadn't only attacked him. Instead, they had attacked everyone indiscriminately. Judging by the power of their attacks, Ling Han concluded that even second heaven celestial kings would be insta-killed by this person, much less first heaven celestial kings. Moreover, the light remained so blinding that even he couldn't open his eyes. Thus, it was only natural that the others couldn't open their eyes either. They could only suffer this brutal massacre. The more dangerous the situation, the more composed Ling Han became. Luan Xing, Niu, stand in a triangular formation with me. Bewitching Maiden Ru, you stand in the middle. The three women all replied in acknowledgement. At this moment, no one would act impetuously. Second brother. Ling Han then called. I'm fine, the Rain Emperor replied. Brother Ji? Yeah. Hua Ferong? Yep. Ling Han confirmed everyone's safety one by one. Everyone had been attacked, and those like Yi and Yang Xianlu had more so been wounded in a single strike. If they hadn't been close to Ji Wuming and Hua Ferong, they would have definitely suffered a much more brutal fate. Fortunately, they had only got a scare. Everyone slowly gathered together, forming a more powerful defensive block. The sound of the agonized wails died down, and the pervasive blinding light also slowly dissipated. After several dozen seconds, everyone finally regained their sight. The survivors had formed 7 main defensive groups, each of which was led by third heaven celestial kings. Surrounded by these 7 groups was the place that had once nurtured the celestial fruit, where a naked person was standing. However, because of the dazzling light radiating from his body, he didn't need to worry about his privates being exposed. Not only was this person stark naked, but he was also bald and without eyebrows. Looking carefully, this person was actually completely hairless. Many celestial kings lay on the ground. Most of them were at the first heaven, and most of them were newly advanced celestial kings. They had managed to break into the top echelon of the world, giving them the freedom to act wantonly, yet they had been killed before they could even leave the celestial path. This was truly a pitiful sight. Who are you? Ling Han asked with sword in hand. He was certain that this hairless person was the culprit. The strength of this person was truly petrifying. In just a few dozen seconds, he had managed to kill more than 1,000 celestial kings. Heaven and earth grieved as if it were the end of the world. The eyes of the hairless person had initially been shut. Now, however, he suddenly opened them. Crack! As if heavenly tribulation were unleashing its might, 2 bolts of lightning arced across the sky. Ling Han felt a flash before his eyes, after which a sense of danger suddenly surged over. He instinctively swung his sword. Wang! The divine demon's sword shuddered. Ling Han couldn't help but feel shocked. At this moment, the hairless person had already arrived before him, aiming to crush his head with a single swipe. However, his attack was blocked by the divine demon's sword. What shocked Ling Han was the fact that the divine demon sword had clearly slashed into the hairless person's arm, yet it had completely failed to breach his defenses. Even celestial tools couldn't wound him. Ling Han understood that celestial tools weren't invincible. As long as one reached the 8th or 9th heaven, they could envelop their body in regulations and easily rival celestial tools. However, this hairless person clearly wasn't at the 8th or 9th heaven. His strength could rival that of Ling Han, and perhaps even surpass it by a little. However, he was still far from reaching the 4th heaven, to say nothing of the 8th heaven. Thus, there was only one other explanation. His arm was forged from divine metal, allowing it to become so tough and powerful. However, if his arm were forged from divine metal, how could he control it with such ease? This was incredibly strange and uncanny. Ling Han pushed forcefully, instantly causing the hairless person to stumble back. The celestial kings were all stunned by this sight. This person was unafraid of celestial tools. Fuck. Is this really a living being and not a humanoid celestial tool? Hui's eyes lit up, and an aura of death rose from his head, intertwining together to form a net. He stared at the hairless person with a fervent expression. The hairless person stabilized himself before stealing a few glances at Ling Han. He then retracted the dazzling light from his eyes, only to reveal a complete lack of pupils. His eyes were fully white. However, they weren't white like the eyes of dead fish, but they were instead white as if countless arcs of lightning were coursing within them. This was a chilling sight. You managed to block one attack from me. Not bad, the hairless person said. His voice was grating, and it was as if these words had been formed by stones scraping against each other. Ling Han smiled, and said, "It's always been me saying these words to others. Who would have thought that I would be on the receiving end today? Perhaps I should say thank you." The hairless person shook his head, and replied, "No need. You'll be killed by me soon, so there's no need to go to so much trouble." "Baldy, are you the fruit from before?" Hua Furong shouted. Her eyes were flickering with flames of fury. She had almost been killed with a single strike just then, and this was something that she had never experienced before. This was utter humiliation. The hairless person looked toward her, and a baleful expression appeared in his eyes as he said, "You sealed your vitality and deceived the heavens. You deserve death." "Huh? What's this got to do with you?" Ling Han asked. He found this situation extremely strange, not just the mysterious appearance of this bald person, but also everything else that had happened. A very long time ago, for example, in Ji Wuming's past life, there had been no need to enter the celestial path to become a celestial king. In fact, even severing mundane tier, dividing soul tier, immortal palace tier, and cultivators of other tiers hadn't needed to go to specified locations to ascend. Their ascension would come naturally when the conditions were ripe. There had been no need for such complexity. However, from some point in time, a restriction had been placed upon the cultivation system, forcing cultivators to follow a specified path. Even so, the celestial path had retained the environment of the ancient past, allowing cultivators to immediately ascend to the severing mundane tier, dividing soul tier, and so on once their cultivation level was satisfactory. Moreover, he had even discovered the old home of the karmic life Heavenly Venerable's mother in this place. Not only that, but the Black Tower would also shudder each time he conquered a structure. It was as if it had resonated with something, and it was as if it had discovered some kind of treasure here, eliciting a reaction. Furthermore, this place had a method that would allow celestial kings to leave, and it contained a flawless celestial seed that everyone desired. Who had spread these rumors? If you don't mind, would you care to give us some explanations? Ling Han said with a smile. His gaze remained firmly fixed on the hairless person. The hairless person pondered for a moment before saying, "In reality, there's no need for me to answer your questions. However, if I want to integrate into this heaven and earth, I should probably try to develop some human emotions." "Fine, I'll answer you. What do you want to know?" he asked. "First, please put on some clothes," Ling Han said. Chapter 2491, Heavenborn. Chapter 2491, Heavenborn. Many people chuckled upon hearing this. However, when they saw the corpses of the celestial kings littered on the ground, they involuntarily stopped smiling. Even though the hairless person looked strange, his strength was truly able to move the heavens and shake the earth. The hairless person replied with an "Oh." A golden glow instantly enveloped his body, and his skin also started to squirm. Before long, a suit of golden armor materialized on his body, completely covering him up. Not only that, but he even grew golden eyebrows and golden hair, completely transforming his appearance. Instead of appearing strange, he now looked like a handsome man. His golden hair looked as if it were forged from gold, and it even rang with a metallic clang as it billowed in the wind. Ling Han was even more astonished. Was this hairless person truly forged from divine metal? After completing his transformation, the hairless person asked, "Your second request? Do you have a name?" Ling Han asked. "Yes," the hairless person replied with a nod. However, he didn't speak his name. Only when he realized that everyone was staring at him did he finally come to his senses, saying, "Oh, my name is Heavenborn." Heavenborn? Nurtured and birthed by heaven and earth. Upon seeing Ling Han open his mouth to ask another question, Heavenborn raised his hand to stop him, saying, "I don't have so much time to waste with you. You can ask one more question, only one." Ling Han pondered for a moment before saying, "This is all part of your plan, correct? From the very moment that we entered the celestial path." No. From the very moment that the celestial path broke away from the celestial realm, correct? Heavenborn hesitated for a moment before nodding in reply. Indeed. Before Ling Han could ask another question, the other party continued in a baleful voice, "All right, I've already answered all of your questions. Now, it's my turn." He raised his hands, with both of his arms transforming into blades that measured 3 meters in length. His body glowed with a colorful glaze, and it was as if he were wielding 2 celestial tools. The celestial kings were all astounded upon hearing his words, even though Heavenborn had simply nodded his head and admitted to a single matter. Just this single piece of information was utterly petrifying. To say nothing of ninth heaven celestial kings, one had to realize that even heavenly venerates couldn't impose additional requirements to the process of cultivation and ascending. Once regulations were formed, they would be like laws that would be upheld in a rigid and emotionless manner. Emperors could amend laws, so who could amend regulations? Heaven and earth. Regulations were formed by heaven and earth, so only heaven and earth itself could amend regulations. In other words, heaven and earth had changed the path of cultivation at the very least, it had made some minor adjustments. It had more so separated the celestial path out, forcing those who wanted to ascend to the celestial king tier to walk this path. Otherwise, they would be unable to cultivate a celestial seed. That being the case, was Heavenborn a being who had been born in this placier form of heaven and earth's will? Who could battle the heavens? No one. Even heavenly venerates couldn't. Otherwise, why did the heavenly venerates of the celestial realm seldom show themselves? This was because they would be targeted by heaven and earth once they appeared. It was also because of this that they were racking their brains and trying everything they could to advance to the second tier. That way, they could break free from this heaven and earth and truly achieve transcendence. Die! Heavenborn roared as we swung his blade-like arms. Ancient symbols lit up, and he radiated with ferocity as he battled against the hundreds of celestial kings. Even third heaven celestial kings didn't dare to face him. Even though they had blocked his surprise attack just then, they had all been wounded as a result. The might of celestial tools was simply terrifying. Now that Heavenborn was charging over head-on, swinging his 2 celestial tools as he did so, how could they possibly block him? Ling Han let out a battle cry as he charged forward. He was extremely interested in Heavenborn's background, so if he managed to suppress him, he wanted to dig out more of his secrets. The Empress and Hunyo also charged forward in unison. They both had celestial tools now, so they indeed had the right to face Heavenborn. Similarly, Hua Furong and Ji Wuming also charged forward. However, as powerful as the Rain Emperor was, he had no right to interfere in this battle. This was because he didn't own a celestial tool. As such, the gulf in power was far too large. Their group was definitely the most powerful, with all 5 celestial kings already at the third heaven one. Add to that their celestial tools, and they indeed had the right to battle against Heavenborn. Meanwhile, Hui chose to remain put. His expression was dark, and it was as if he were mulling over something, weighing up his gains and losses. Heavenborn was truly powerful, displaying a peerless might as he brandished his twin blades. Even against 5 powerful celestial kings with celestial tools, he still remained calm and unhurried as he danced around. In fact, his battle prowess was only slightly superior to that of the others. Thus, theoretically speaking, he shouldn't have been able to rival the 5/3 heaven celestial kings. However, his physique was far too unique, allowing him to remain unfazed even when he was struck by celestial tools. His wounds would be shallow, and no blood would flow from them. It was as if his foes had struck divine metal. Was he still a living being? He was clearly a humanoid celestial tool. Seize this opportunity to leave, the surviving members of the newly advanced celestial kings exclaimed. They needed to take this chance to enter the transference portal. Otherwise, once Heavenborn disposed of Ling Han and the others, none of them would be able to escape. They all dashed forward, aiming to enter the transference portal. Whoosh! There was a flash of golden light, after which blood sprayed through the air. Several celestial kings collapsed to the ground, dead. Heaven and earth wailed in grief. This was the doing of Heavenborn. He was truly powerful, being able to come and go as he pleased. Ling Han and the others couldn't obstruct him at all. At this moment, Heavenborn's strength surprisingly soared by an explosive amount. Ling Han immediately came to his senses, exclaiming, "He can absorb the vitality of celestial kings to nurture and strengthen himself." It was no wonder he had massacred so many celestial kings immediately after entering the world. This was in order to strengthen himself. His reason for preventing them from leaving was also the same. They were all nutrients for his growth, so he naturally couldn't waste these precious cultivation resources. He was a downright monster who relied on slaughter and absorbing the vitality of celestial kings in order to strengthen himself. There was definitely no precedent to this. Heavenborn. Heavenborn. Nurtured and born by heaven and earth. Is this foreshadowing something? Hu Furong muttered with a frown. Perhaps this was an intentional creation of heaven and earth. Hui, are you still going to stand around? Ling Han shouted. With Hui's help, perhaps they could suppress Heavenborn. Hesitation flashed across Hui's face. He had once been a celestial medicine. Even though he had now become a powerful celestial king, his thought process was still vastly different from that of the others. He had his own unique values. Was it worth it to interfere? Don't seek death, Heavenborn said as he glanced over with a cold expression. As a wood spirit, you should understand this. Meanwhile, my body has been forged from divine metal, so if you choose to oppose me, your fate can only be death. In the past, you were already no match for me. Now, you're even more so no match for me. Seeing that we have the same origins, I can allow you to live. However, don't seek death. Ling Han and the others were deeply astonished. As it turned out, Hui and Heavenborn were actually old acquaintances. It was no wonder that Hui's strength was also earth-shattering. He had most likely gone through the same experience as Heavenborn. With his hundreds of thousands of vines, he was peerless among those at the same cultivation level. Humans simply couldn't attain such strength through cultivation. Such strength could only be nurtured by heaven and earth. Hui wore a confused expression as he replied, "You know me? Haha. So you haven't recovered from that battle yet. I guess that makes sense. At that time, we fought using our divine senses, battling for the chance to be born. With your wounds, it's no surprise that your memory has been affected," Heavenborn said in a proud voice. He turned his attention away from Hui, focusing back on Ling Han. "You have something that I'm very familiar with. Heh, don't utter such nonsense with a straight face. I'm not familiar with any hunk of metal like you," Ling Han replied. Heavenborn didn't pay any heed to Ling Han's jab. Instead, he continued to stare at Ling Han. At some moment, he suddenly pointed over, with his golden blade transforming into a large golden hand. With a slight shudder, he then recited several cryptic chants. The others didn't feel any change. However, Ling Han's expression suddenly changed drastically. The black tower inside him had awakened. Chapter 2492 Incarnation of Heaven and Earth. Chapter 2492 Incarnation of Heaven and Earth. The Black Tower had fallen into a deep slumber long ago. In order to save Ling Han, his intergenerational disciple, the karmic life Heavenly Venerable had combusted his damaged soul and forcefully affected the circulation of the Heavenly Tao. This had allowed Heavenly Venerate Wu Le to recover his strength and thus suppress the Jiuwu Heavenly Venerate and the sealed emotion Heavenly Venerable. It was also because of this that the Black Tower had exhausted all of its energy. According to the karmic life Heavenly Venerable, Ling Han could only restore the Black Tower to its former glory after ascending to the Heavenly Venerable tier. Now, however, the Black Tower was surprisingly about to awaken. How was this possible? I was nurtured and born by heaven and earth, so after that unfilial karmic life returned to heaven and earth, I was naturally able to grasp his powers, Heavenborn said, casually dropping another bombshell of a secret. Everyone was shaken upon hearing this, going completely numb with shock. Sure enough, he was born from the willpower of heaven and earth. Using himself to fuse with the heavenly Tao, the karmic life Heavenly Venerable had sealed the two-realm passageway, causing his willpower to be trapped in this heaven and earth forever. Meanwhile, Heavenborn was nurtured and born by heaven and earth, and he had perhaps even inherited the will of heaven and earth. Thus, he had also obtained the karmic life Heavenly Venerable's skills. In fact, he had grasped even more of these skills than Ling Han, the intergenerational disciple of the karmic life Heavenly Venerable. This was because, in some sense, Heavenborn was actually the karmic life Heavenly Venerable. Indeed, why had the Black Tower reacted every time he had conquered a structure in this realm? Perhaps this place had been the past Tao Plaza of the karmic life Heavenly Venerable. Or perhaps the Black Tower had sensed the existence of Heavenborn. Boom! Ling Han's chest split apart, and the Black Tower soared out by itself. Even though it had exhausted all of its energy, it was still a Heavenly Venerate tool, after all. With its quality and power, Ling Han naturally couldn't obstruct it. Ling Han vomited blood. He had essentially been struck by a powerful Heavenly Venerate tool. If he hadn't been acquainted with the Black Tower for countless years, and if the Black Tower hadn't been devoid of power at this moment, he wouldn't have only vomited blood. Instead, he might have been instantly killed. Heavenborn made a grasping motion, and the Black Tower immediately landed in his hands. There was no sense of incoherence at all. He smiled, and said, not needing to worry about any rules, being able to slaughter people as I please, being able to act as I want. This feeling is incredible. He radiated with grossly sinister killing intent. At this moment, Ling Han had already channeled the indestructible Heaven's Scroll to heal himself. However, would the wound caused by a Heavenly Venerate tool be so easy to heal? In fact, this kind of wound might remain even if he died and rose from the ashes again. In any case, Ling Han wasn't especially worried about losing the Black Tower. After all, it had always belonged to the karmic life Heavenly Venerable, and it wasn't a precious tool that he had nurtured and refined by himself. As such, this was a tool that didn't align with his Tao. However, he couldn't allow the belongings of the karmic life Heavenly Venerable to fall into the hands of an unfamiliar person, either. You're not heaven and earth itself, are you? Ling Han asked, suddenly thinking of this possibility. After all, Heavenborn had referred to the karmic life Heavenly Venerable as an unfilial person. Moreover, he had uttered these words even though he clearly wasn't the father or mother of the karmic life Heavenly Venerable. As such, there was only a single possibility: was heaven and earth itself. Everything in the celestial realm had been nurtured by heaven and earth. All living beings were the children of heaven and earth. Heavenborn faltered for a brief moment before bursting into loud laughter. Even though you're not fully correct, you're already on the verge of the truth. Then why don't you satiate my curiosity? Ling Han said with a smile. I'm not interested. Heavenborn replied with a humph. He lashed out again, with his right hand transforming into a golden blade that furiously slashed at its foes. Meanwhile, his left hand held the Black Tower, which had now grown to 3 meters in height. He wielded it like a staff, sweeping it at Ling Han and the others. Even though the Black Tower couldn't unleash its power anymore, in terms of its quality, it was still paramount in nature. Thus, combined with Heavenborn's power, it could still unleash a terrifying might even when used as a staff. Ling Han and the others were forced into retreat, not daring to face its power. Ling Han sighed with emotion. The Black Tower had saved him and helped him countless times, yet now it had become a weapon in someone else's hand. Not only that, but it was even being used to suppress him. This was truly ironic. Heavenborn unleashed his murderous nature, surprisingly being able to target the first heaven and second heaven celestial kings even as he battled against Ling Han and the others. As the Black Tower whistled through the air, those who were struck by it would all lose their life. It had been forged from heavenly venerable tier materials, after all, so it didn't need to unleash its true might at all. Who could block it? Many celestial kings blocked it. However, before Heavenborn, they couldn't be regarded as celestial kings at all. They were simply like crops for harvest. Meanwhile, Heavenborn grew stronger and stronger after absorbing the blood essence of these celestial kings. Like a rolling snowball gaining size, he became increasingly powerful and unstoppable. In just a few hours, only 100 or so celestial kings remained. One had to realize that there had initially been 10,000 or so celestial kings. Heavenborn's battle prowess soared to the fourth heaven, a terrifying height. After all, which celestial king could increase their strength by so much in just half a day's time? Even as powerful as Ling Han and Hua Furong were, they could only defend themselves at this moment. It was simply impossible to stop Heavenborn. Let's go. We need to leave the celestial path first. They decided to break free and teleport away from this place first. There were many high-level celestial kings in the outside world, so would the 8th heaven and 9th heaven celestial kings still be unable to suppress Heavenborn? Even if he were the incarnation of heaven and earth, there was still Ju Heng to suppress him, no? This was a 6th tier heavenly venerate, someone who was even more powerful than the celestial realm itself. Did I allow you to leave? Heavenborn said in a baleful voice. He lunged over, brandishing both blade and tower as he did so, blocking Ling Han and the others' path. He clearly hadn't activated the regulations of time or the regulations of space, yet the speed of his lunge was truly quite frightening. Fundamental power, Ling Han said with a raise of his eyebrow. He had also extracted the fundamental power of the Genesis world before. Thus, apart from heavenly venerates, he possessed the most expertise in this area. Fundamental power belonged to heaven and earth, and heavenly venerates would steal this power in order to transcend the regulations. By doing so, they would also be untolerated by heaven and earth. Now, however, a mere celestial king was actually able to wield this fundamental power. Or perhaps he was unable to wield it. Perhaps, like Ling Han, he had simply been tempered by this power. However, this still allowed him to become astonishingly powerful. This was simply unfathomable. What did this signify? He was truly fortuned by heaven and earth. In fact, he might even be the incarnation of heaven and earth. Only then could he possess such talent and abilities. You're also an unfilial child, Heavenborn said as he looked over. He resolutely lashed out, aiming to kill Ling Han. You need to return to me, he continued. Fucking weirdo, piss off, Ling Han said as he brandished his divine demon sword. However, the divine demon sword wasn't at the heavenly venerable tier, after all, so it continued to shudder under the forceful impact of the collisions with the Black Tower. It was as if it were about to shatter. This was suppression in terms of quality. The Empress and the others hurriedly rushed over to lend a hand. Not to mention the Empress and Hu Niu, Ling Han's closest family, even Hua Furong wouldn't ignore his plight. This was because their fates were now tied together. She had to help. Whoosh. A black shadow shot over. This was a vine. Hui finally joined the battle. Moreover, his target wasn't Ling Han and the others. Instead, it was Heavenborn. You're seeking death. Heavenborn roared in rage. His golden blade slashed down, easily severing the vine. Hui was emotionless as he said, I detest you. His outlook was very simple. He would pummel those who he detested. Heavenborn roared with laughter. Very well. At that time, I had already wanted to obliterate you once and for all. However, it was a shame that you managed to escape. This time, I'll engulf you and comprehensively complete my soul. He had never planned to spare Hui. Instead, he had only been attempting to hold him back before so that it would be easier to dispose of him later. Unexpectedly, however, Hui hadn't given him this chance. He had finally decided to interfere. With Hui joining the battle, the scene instantly became grand and magnificent, with tens if thousands of vines shooting forth at once. Even though none of these vines were able to rival Ling Han and the others as individual entities, once there were enough of them, they could force a qualitative change. Thus, Heavenborn had no option but to divide some of his attention to face Hui. Otherwise, if his arms and legs were tied down, it would be completely possible that Ling Han and the others might seize the opportunity to leave via the transference portal. The 6 powerful beings worked together to battle against Heavenborn. Among them, there was even a freak like Hui. However, Heavenborn was undoubtedly the greatest freak among them, brandishing his golden blades and slicing through the vines as if they were limp vegetables. Ling Han and the others were still unable to breach his defenses. Chapter 2493, Hopeless Situation. Chapter 2493, Hopeless Situation. Heavenborn's strength was beyond comprehension. Perhaps his existence alone was already beyond comprehension. As the incarnation of the heavenly Tao's will, he was already extraordinary from the moment he was born. The appearance of the celestial path, and the death of all those celestial kings. All of this had been for his birth. Which elite's birth had ever required the death of tens of thousands of celestial kings? This was unprecedented. Heavenborn was extremely ferocious, with each part of his body able to transform into a celestial tool. His destructiveness was astonishing. Moreover, just how tough was his divine metal body? Even when striking it with another celestial tool, it was still extremely difficult to cause any damage. If they wanted to rely on brute strength, however, perhaps only the strength of ninth heaven celestial kings could damage divine metal. Ling Han and the others were completely suppressed. Even Hui was unable to unleash his full potential before Heavenborn. Even though his vines were numerous, they would immediately snap once they came into contact with Heavenborn. This was because layers of razor-sharp blades had materialized on Heavenborn's skin, instantly severing any vines that wrapped around them. Thus, Hui was completely unable to obstruct Heavenborn. The 6 elites were unable to gain an upper hand even though they had already teamed up. Heavenborn was like a divine mountain, lofty and insurmountable, draining one of any hope. Ling Han and the others couldn't help but frown. How was it possible for someone like Heavenborn to exist? A divine metal body signified that he was close to invincible. Even if one were more powerful than him, they would still only be able to suppress him, but not wound him. In fact, would it be possible to melt him if he were tossed into a furnace for countless years? However, even paramount flames could only melt divine metal, and not incinerate them. Thus, would this truly kill him? This was the product of heaven and earth's will. If he could be killed so easily, then wouldn't heaven and earth be far too trashy? This was just like Wall-E. He was the culmination of several epochs of work of a dimension. Even though his battle prowess wasn't especially strong, his analytical ability was something that no one could hope to match. Moreover, even the large black dog had failed to kill him. Anyhow, their situation went from bad to worse at this moment, with the purple light starting to creep over again. With the exception of Ling Han, the battle prowess of everyone else was severely affected. However, Heavenborn remained unfazed, and it was extremely likely that he was just like Ling Han. Perhaps he also possessed extraordinary body arts that had been tempered by the fundamental power of the Genesis world. Perhaps his physique was also transcendent above the regulations. Everyone started to ingest subduing purple fruits, recovering their battle prowess. However, the problem was that they didn't enjoy the upper hand, so what was the point of struggling in futility? One after another, they continued to ingest subduing purple fruit after subduing purple fruit, maintaining their strength. Even so, they were still unable to rival Heavenborn, with the number of wounds on their bodies increasing. These were wounds left by celestial tools, so they would cause severe damage regardless of where they were located. The remaining celestial kings were all doing their best to help. They could neither advance nor retreat, so they had no other choice but to put their lives on the line against Heavenborn. However, this was useless. Heavenborn was far too powerful, with his battle prowess infinitesimally close to the fourth heaven. He wantonly attacked, with no one able to stop him. Ling Han was as pale as a sheet, with the wound on his chest caused by the Black Tower still yet to recover. Not only that, but he had even suffered more wounds during the battle. This brought him immense pain. More importantly, even though he had also struck Heavenborn with his celestial tool, Heavenborn was a celestial tool to begin with, so what did it matter even if he were struck? It would cause him no harm. If this continued, they would all die. Perhaps he had to use the Dimension Scroll? However, Ling Han suspected that as an incarnation of heaven and earth, perhaps Heavenborn was unafraid of even heavenly tribulation. After all, no heavenly tribulation had descended during his birth. Heaven and earth had definitely opened the back door for him. That being the case, how could heaven and earth punish him with a tribulation? What to do? What to do? At this moment, Ling Han even considered entering the transference portal at all costs, after which he would ask Ju Heng for help. Others might not be able to enter the celestial path, but Ju Heng would definitely have a way. If it really came to it, he could simply rip the celestial path out from the void. A sixth-tier heavenly venerate was innately more powerful than heaven and earth, so it was definitely no difficult task to do this. However, it would definitely take him time to find Ju Heng. Thus, it was entirely possible that the others would have all been killed by the time Ju Heng arrived. Meanwhile, perhaps Heavenborn would have already fled, vanishing without a trace. He was nurtured and born by heaven and earth, so he could definitely blend together with heaven and earth in a flawless manner. Even heavenly venerates would be unable to detect him unless Ju Heng obliterated the entire celestial realm. Perhaps Ling Han could draw everyone into a spatial god tool? However, with Heavenborn watching him, would that be possible? Heavenborn was a living person who more so possessed formidable strength. With no one to hold him back, how could Ling Han possibly break free? This would be an impossible task. With the title of number 1 Celestial Maiden of the Ages, even Hua Furong was wearing a deep frown at this moment. She couldn't think of any way to break free. As the reincarnation of the most powerful Ninth Heaven Celestial King, even Ji Wuming was currently wearing a troubled expression. Heavenborn's appearance had shattered the restrictions of the regulations. Those who had cultivated step by step could never hope to rival him. Peng! Warm blood sprayed into the air as Fuju's head went flying. Meanwhile, the golden blade engulfed the essence of this blood, funneling power into Heavenborn. Ling Han couldn't help but roar in rage. Even though he hadn't known Fuju for long, this was his underling, after all. Seeing him killed right before his eyes was far too painful. Ha 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 ha. Heavenborn roared with wanton laughter. He cared not for the emotions and feelings of others as he continued his brutal massacre. At this moment, even the third heaven celestial kings started to shed blood. First heaven and second heaven celestial kings were more so like crops being harvested, with none of them being able to escape from Heavenborn's blade. A short while later, He Xinjue was also killed, his blood spraying across Ling Han's body. This caused Ling Han's expression to become increasingly cold. He was definitely going to kill Heavenborn. Amazing. This feels far too amazing. Heavenborn said with booming laughter. I don't need to abide by any stupid fucking rules. Being able to do as I please truly feels amazing. Unfilial brats, it's not only you people who can defy the heavens. I am the heaven. I am your ruler. Heavenborn was like a demon lord who was bathing in the blood of celestial kings. A mist of blood enveloped him, appearing as harrowing as could be. You think this is my full power? He roared with laughter as he clapped his hands. Boom! A column of flames burst forth, instantly transforming the ground into lava. Walls of flames surged over, forcing even third heaven celestial kings to jump around in apprehension. This was the great Tao of fire. Everyone's expression changed drastically. Not only was Heavenborn forged from divine metal, but his mastery of the regulations was also astonishing. The might of his flame attack was profound, and it was showing signs of surpassing the third heaven and directly soaring to the fourth heaven. This world has always belonged to me, So it's time for you people to return your power to me now. Heaven-born shouted. He was much like a madman. Did he truly view himself as heaven and earth? Linghan humphed coldly, saying, "We've obtained our strength through diligent and painstaking cultivation, so you have no right to strip it from us even if you're the damned heaven." "Is that so?" Heaven-born said with a sneer. The corners of his lips curled up into a smile that was filled with killing intent as he continued, "Then I'll prove you wrong." He surged over with boundless flames. Combined with his golden blades, the formidable black tower, and his extraordinary strength, could anyone hope to face him head-on? "Perish, all of you, perish," he screamed with crazed laughter. Whoosh! He dashed over, yet halfway through his movement, his body suddenly froze. "Damn it," he involuntarily roared. "You've already fused together with Tao and returned to my body, so why are you still resisting?" These words were extremely baffling, and no one knew what was happening. However, something had definitely gone wrong for Heavenborn. Everyone could determine this. "Seize this opportunity," Linghan hurriedly shouted. Heavenborn had already gained an absolute advantage, so there was no need for him to toy with them like this. Time to flee. Chapter 2494, Breaking Free. Chapter 2494, Breaking Free. In your dreams. Heavenborn roared as he suddenly charged over again. Raging flames surged and golden blades danced. He managed to block everyone, yet a twisted expression spread across his face again. "Fuck off. Fuck off. Fuck off," he roared. After screaming, his expression became even more twisted. He bent down and clasped his head in his hands, unable to stop himself from wailing in agony. "Hurry!" Linghan immediately shouted to the Empress and the others. The three women were all looking at him. "I'll definitely survive," Linghan said with a solemn nod. The three women didn't say anything else, and they all sprinted toward the transference portal. Moreover, they weren't the only ones. Seizing this opportunity, the surviving Celestial Kings all dashed toward the transference portal as if their lives depended on it. Meanwhile, the Celestial Kings from the Celestial Path all sprinted as far away as they could. They couldn't leave the Celestial Path, so they could naturally only choose to retreat. "Stop right there," Heavenborn screamed, with flames shooting from his eyes and slashing at the transference portal. A devastating sword chi swept over, slashing even Third Heaven Celestial Kings into two. However, Linghan was already prepared for this, and he swung his divine demon sword to parry. Peng! He was instantly sent stumbling back by the powerful sword chi, vomiting blood as he did so. Right now, Heavenborn's battle prowess had already soared to the fourth heaven. He was profoundly powerful. Many more people leaped into the transference portal. At this moment, Heavenborn was completely unable to stop them. "Damn it! Damn it! Damn it! You're already dead, so why are you still disturbing me?" Heavenborn bellowed in fury. His right hand continued to shift shapes, transforming into a saber, a sword, and sometimes a staff. Linghan was already about to leave, yet he involuntarily faltered upon seeing this. Why was Heavenborn suddenly acting like he had an epileptic attack? Was this because the karmic life Heavenly Venerable was affecting him? This indeed made sense. The karmic life Heavenly Venerable had already passed away and fused together with Tao, allowing Heavenborn to comprehend all of his skills. Even the Black Tower was more attached to him than Linghan. At the same time, however, a portion of the karmic life Heavenly Venerable's will would also exist within him as a result. It was just that Heavenborn's will enjoyed the dominant position. The karmic life Heavenly Venerable's will could only affect him a little. Even though this disturbance was only limited, during critical times such as this, it could definitely become a deciding factor. Master is indeed the best. He's saved me from another difficult situation. Suppress. Heavenborn roared. Not only did flames shoot from his body, but there were even arcs of lightning crackling in his eyes. His expression rapidly calmed down, and it was clear that the karmic life Heavenly Venerable's will was about to be suppressed by him. Linghan didn't hesitate any longer, leaping into the transference portal. Whoosh! A burst of sword chi slashed over, as vicious as could be. Without even turning his head, Linghan immediately parried with his sword. Peng! He couldn't help but shudder, and his body was crooked as he crashed through the transference portal. The scenes before him instantly changed. This was a dark spatial passageway. When he looked behind him, the transference portal had already transformed into a small white speck. However, he quickly saw Heavenborn charging over. He continued to pursue Ling Han in the passageway, and it was as if he were intent on killing Ling Han. Fuck. Ling Han hurriedly spread his legs and sprinted as fast as he could. Inside this spatial passageway, he didn't dare to activate the regulations to perform teleportation or time acceleration. Otherwise, it was very likely that he would disturb the flow of space and destroy this spatial passageway. "You can't escape," Heavenborn shouted. His speed was astonishing. He hadn't used the power of regulations either, and he was simply relying on the might of his body arts. He drew closer and closer to Ling Han. With his immense speed, it was very likely that he would catch up to Ling Han in just a few seconds. Meanwhile, the Empress and the others were only slightly ahead of Ling Han. Ling Han steeled his heart and instantly stopped in his tracks, swinging his divine demon sword. Boom! Regulations burst from his body. Since Heavenborn insisted, he would destroy this spatial passageway. "You dare!" Heavenborn roared as he reached Ling Han. He swung his blade at Ling Han. Ling Han retreated, continuing to attack as he did so. However, his target wasn't Heavenborn. Instead, it was the passageway. Right now, his battle prowess was at the peak stage of the third heaven, so just how devastating was his destructive ability? It wasn't long before the entire passageway started to shake, with beams of peculiar light shining down. It was as if the passageway were about to shatter. "Stop at once!" Heavenborn bellowed in wild rage. Even though he had been nurtured and born by heaven and earth, gifting him with all kinds of peculiar abilities, he would also have no choice but to be washed away with the flow if this spatial passageway were truly to shatter. Of course, he definitely wouldn't die. With his divine metal body, perhaps only heavenly venerates and ninth heaven celestial kings could suppress him. However, would Ling Han pay any heed to this? He hastened his attacks on the spatial passageway. Peng, peng, peng. The entire passageway radiated with a dazzling glow, suddenly exploding in a violent manner at some moment. Ling Han was predictably sent flying. In fact, even his powerful physique and defenses were of little help, and he felt as if his bones had all been crushed into pieces. Shards of the great Tao more so pierced into his body, making him feel as terrible as could be. Fortunately, Heavenborn was also sent flying. Moreover, he was sent flying in the opposite direction. In the face of such a powerful explosion, even Heavenborn was unable to resist, having no option but to be sent flying. The explosions continued, emanating across the two directions. At this moment, Ling Han could only pray in his mind, hoping that the Empress and the others had managed to escape from the spatial passageway in time. Otherwise, they would definitely be severely wounded by the explosions, if not killed. His vision then darkened as he drifted out of consciousness. His wounds were far too severe. His chest had been torn apart by a heavenly venerate tool, and he had also suffered many gashes at the hands of Heavenborn's celestial tool blades. He had more so been wounded by the gigantic explosion of the spatial passageway. Even a person forged from metal wouldn't be able to withstand so many severe wounds. After heaven knew how long, he finally regained consciousness. An indescribable pain washed over him, and he was completely unable to open his eyes. He attempted to activate his divine sense, yet he was only able to use a wisp of it after exerting all of his energy. He examined his body, and he involuntarily let out a bitter chuckle in his mind. Very well, this body is truly riddled with gaping wounds. He had already suffered severe wounds in the first place, and the shock wave from the gigantic explosion of the spatial passageway had been even more brutal. Right now, countless shards of the great Tao of space were embedded inside him. This was much like a mortal human being stabbed full of blades. Was this much different from dying? Fortunately, Ling Han was no ordinary mortal. Even if I want to move a little, I'll need to wait for at least 100 years, Ling Han thought to himself. In fact, even after 100 years, he would only recover a sliver of his battle prowess. He was still far, far away from making a full recovery. Moreover, he involuntarily sighed. His spatial god tool had also been shattered into pieces during that gigantic explosion, destroying everything inside it. Right now, I can only rely on myself to recover. Ling Han wanted to know where he was, yet he was unable to open his eyes and also unable to release his divine sense. He was completely blind at this moment. He sighed in his mind again. As a mighty celestial king who possessed a battle prowess at the third heaven, what could he do now? He was even weaker than an ordinary mortal. He could only remain lying there. In any case, his physique was already at the celestial king tier, so the natural elements obviously wouldn't affect him. 1 day, 10 days, 15 days. Time silently crept by. Ling Han tried his best to remove the shards of the great Tao from his body, yet his progress was as slow as could be. However, this was inevitable. His wounds were truly far too severe. He could only take things slowly. There were wild beasts here, and Ling Han was more so in an extremely frail state at this moment. He didn't possess the might or threatening aura of a celestial king, so he was also unable to frighten them away. From time to time, some wild beasts would wander over to bite him. However, his physique was thankfully powerful enough, so the wild beasts were unable to consume him even though he was already riddled with severe wounds. In fact, the wild beasts that bit him would all have their teeth shattered by his powerful physique. After more than 6 months, he was finally discovered by someone else. Chapter 2495 – Difficult Process of Treating Wounds. Chapter 2495 – Difficult Process of Treating Wounds. Young miss, there's a person lying here, a woman said. After a while, he heard the other woman reply, pick him up and carry him back to the clan. But young miss, his background is unclear, and is also riddled with severe wounds. It's extremely likely that he offended someone and was hunted down by them, forcing him to flee here. If we're somehow dragged into this matter, the first woman said. The young miss was clearly unhappy hearing this, and she said in a serious tone, Lu He, what do I always tell you? Oh, one has to have a kind heart and always extend a helping hand when possible, the first woman replied. However, her voice was much softer, and it was clear that she was feeling slightly down after the criticism. Then what are you still waiting for? The young miss said. Ling Han immediately felt someone lifting him up. However, the maidservant instantly let out an astonished yelp. This was because she discovered that Ling Han's entire body was completely limp, with not a single bone intact. His wounds are actually this severe, the young miss exclaimed in astonishment. Young miss, to survive after suffering such severe wounds, this person is most likely very powerful. What if he's a bad person and turns on us after his wounds heal? The maidservant hurriedly said again. The young miss pondered for a moment before saying, if I leave him to die after already seeing him, my mind won't be able to rest easy. The maidservant was left with no option but to carry Ling Han away. Because Ling Han was now a sack of crushed bones and broken flesh, unable to exert any power, the maidservant could only rely on herself to pull Ling Han onto her back. Ling Han was unable to move, speak, or even open his eyes. He could only sense that he was brought into a room after several hours. A doctor then came to visit him, yet they immediately declared that he was dead. Young miss, his wounds are far too severe, so I'm afraid that he can't live for more than 3 days. Even if he's only got 3 days left, we still have to treat him to the best of our abilities, the young miss said. Ling Han felt someone setting his bones for him, yet this was naturally a futile struggle. If the shards of the great Tao weren't removed from his body, he would be nothing more than a complete cripple. What help could ordinary medicines be? Even ordinary celestial king-tier medicines would be useless for him. He needed at least high-level celestial king-tier medicines. Right now, Ling Han was trying his best to recover his grasp on the regulations of time. Even if he could only activate a sliver of this regulation, this would still speed up his recovery process by a significant amount. Then, like a rolling snowball gaining in size, his recovery would eventually become quicker and quicker. 3 days passed, and his situation remained the same as before. There was no improvement, yet he hadn't died, either. Even the doctor was astounded. After re-examining Ling Han, he again reached the same conclusion. Young miss, he can't live for more than 3 days. 3 days later, Ling Han's situation remained the same. There was neither an improvement nor a deterioration. He hadn't died, either. The young miss didn't call for the doctor again. Instead, she simply allowed Ling Han to lay in the room. In any case, her clan was large and wealthy, so it was no big task to nurture a sick person. Time flew by. 5 years passed, and the young miss had already married someone. However, she was the only successor of her clan, so it was instead her husband who moved in with her. Several years later, she gave birth to a son. Her son also grew up quickly, eventually becoming a father himself. Ling Han's situation still remained the same. This young miss was called Zhao Yulio, and her clan was located in a place called Vast Prosperous Town. However, Ling Han was unsure of where exactly this was located. After all, no one would go out of their way to speak to a dead person. He had only heard mentions of these matters from passers-by. More than 50 years later, the Zhao clan welcomed their 4th generation. This clan had few children, and Zhao Yulio didn't have any siblings, either. Moreover, she had only given birth to a single son as well. Each generation only had a single successor. The 4th generation child of the Zhao clan was called Zhao Xin, and his name carried the meaning of passing down the flames of the Zhao clan and allowing it to flourish. He was only 3 years old at the moment, and he was truly as mischievous as could be. He always ran around the clan, and he didn't forget about Ling Han's room, either. However, he hadn't gone as far as to jump around on Ling Han's bed. Each time he entered, he would simply stare at Ling Han and babble whatever was on his mind. This became a habit of his, and each time he encountered something bad, he would run over to tell Ling Han all about it. This finally allowed Ling Han to learn more about Vast Prosperous Town. This place revered power, yet the average cultivation level of the people was quite low. For example, Zhao Yulio could already be regarded as an elite even though she was only at the 9th refinement of the body refining tier. In fact, she was already one of the top elites of Vast Prosperous Town. However, the later generations of the Zhao clan all lacked cultivation talent, with not a single person reaching the 5th refinement. If it weren't for Grandma Zhao holding on, it was very likely that the Zhao clan would rapidly lose its status. However, Zhao Yulio was already an old grandma over 80 years old, so it was hard to say how much longer she could hold on. Everyone in the Zhao clan felt like there were dark times ahead of them. Zhao Xin was also no good at cultivation. Everyone in his cultivation class had already reached the 1st refinement, yet he still continued to lag behind. If it weren't for the Zhao clan's power and influence, the cultivation school would have already expelled him long ago. Teaching him was a complete waste of time and effort. Zhao Xin genuinely belonged to the category of people who tried hard yet didn't get any returns. He was clearly putting in a lot of effort, yet his strength wouldn't go up no matter what. He treated Ling Han as someone to reveal his troubles to, and this was because only Ling Han would listen to him without laughing and without putting pressure on him. Ling Han allowed him to speak as he pleased. In the blink of an eye, Zhao Xin had already turned 15. On this day, he was once again humiliated in his cultivation class. A young girl whom he had loved for a long time played a mean trick on him, calling him into a small forest for a secret meeting. However, what greeted him were several other boys. Afterward, they gave him a violent pummeling. "Undying Grandpa, what did I do wrong? They said I'm a toad who wants to marry a beautiful swan. Should I really quit the academy?" The young man was filled with pain as he asked these questions. At the same time, he was also hesitating about whether he should truly abandon cultivation to live an honest life as an ordinary person. Right at this moment, a voice suddenly sounded in his head. "If you abandon cultivation just like this, will you truly feel content?" "Who is it?" Zhao Xin exclaimed as he shot up in alarm. He looked all around him, yet he didn't see anyone at the door or the windows. He then looked back at Ling Han in astonishment, asking, "Undying Grandpa, was that you just then?" Ling Han sighed, and said, "Yes, silly boy." After so many years, he could finally release a wisp of his divine sense. However, he could only use it for simple communication. He had stayed in the Zhao clan this entire time, so it could be said that they had helped him avoid the beatings of the elements. Thus, he was also willing to give Zhao Xin some guidance. "But your mouth didn't move, Zhao Xin exclaimed in astonishment. Was this some kind of mystical power? Silly boy, if you want to become stronger, then shuffle over a bit, Ling Han said with his divine sense. Zhao Xin hesitated upon hearing this. Ling Han's appearance was truly a little frightening. He wouldn't suck his essential power dry to replenish his own energy, right? After pondering for a moment, he finally shuffled over. This was mainly because Ling Han was truly far too mysterious. Everyone thought he would die within 3 days, yet dozens of years had already passed, and his condition was still the same as before. Moreover, he didn't age, either. Forget about it, he would give this a shot. Chapter 2496, Repaying Kindness. Chapter 2496, Repaying Kindness. Ling Han released his divine sense. At present, he really was extremely weak. Merely a sweep through Zhao Xin's body was enough to cause him extreme strain. However, he naturally could not ignore the kindness that he had been given. He was a celestial king, and even if he was injured, he was still a celestial king. He understood with a mere sweep. Zhao Xin's aptitude in cultivation was indeed very poor. He was definitely not a supreme extraordinary prodigy that had not been discovered. He truly was mediocre. Ling Han frowned internally. If he was still in his prime condition, changing Zhao Xin's aptitude would naturally be a piece of cake. Even if he could not turn him into a monarch star, becoming an ordinary prodigy was not the slightest bit difficult. Yet now, he really could only speak through divine sense. What was he to do? After some thinking, Ling Han finally came to a decision. He would design a cultivation technique for Zhao Xin personally, and improve his strength as much as possible. Zhao Xin, seeing Ling Han remaining silent for so long, could not help but ask, "Grandpa immortal. If he kept straining his body like this, he would feel bad." Ling Han released his divine sense, allowing Zhao Xin to retreat. Then, he said, "I will teach you a cultivation technique. Memorize it." He spoke word after word, guiding Zhao Xin on how he should channel the power in his body, to strengthen his bones, flesh, and muscles. Zhao Xin hurriedly took note of it. He did not know who Ling Han was, but that was all right. Just given the fact that Ling Han looked to be on his deathbed but still lived for these few decades, without the slightest aging in his appearance at that, he knew that there had to be something amazing about Ling Han. After he had taught him the cultivation technique, Ling Han said, "You may go." He thought for a moment, and then said, "Do not let others know that I was the one who taught you." He still had to recover his injuries. If the members of Zhao clan found out, even if it was just to express their thanks, it would affect him. The reason why he had moved to help Zhao Xin was also because Ling Han knew that if Zhao Xin really did not amount to much, it really was possible that the Zhao clan would end in this generation. Ling Han was not a man that enjoyed owing debts. If the Zhao clan was really finished, whom would he repay the favor to? Zhao Xin agreed and left. Just over a dozen days later, he ran over in excitement, and exclaimed, "Grandpa immortal, the cultivation technique you taught me is really useful. I have already reached the peak stage of the first layer of the body refining tier, and am soon about to break through the second layer." This was natural. Even if Zhao Xin was even more mediocre, Ling Han was a celestial king, and had even been the overlord of a realm before. How could the cultivation technique that he had created especially for the boy not be awesome? However, Ling Han sighed internally. This brat's natural talent was indeed extremely poor, or he should already have achieved the second layer of the body refining tier by now, or even charged to the third layer. Forget it, in any case, he had a lot of time, and Zhao Xin did not have too little time, either. Cultivate well. Ling Han only spoke these words. Having Ling Han as a cheat code, Zhao Xin's cultivation level naturally soared. Very soon, he was shining with brilliance, and became a prominent rising star in the martial hall. He had also become the most representative example of former trash that had staged a comeback. Who knew how many beautiful women admired him, and this also caused the young girl who had previously made fun of him to feel extreme regret. Zhao Xin's strength soon surpassed that of Zhao Yulio, and also made Zhao Yulio feel very gratified. Furthermore, the legend of this youth was still continuing. He broke through to the element gathering tier within half a year's time, and he advanced into the gushing spring tier another year later at an astonishing speed. And from the information that Zhao Xin had told him, Ling Han was becoming more and more depressed. Where exactly was this place? Ling Han had considered all the places in both eastern and western celestial realms, yet could not match what Zhao Xin had told him with any of those places. Then, he came up with a deduction. It couldn't be that he had entered into a small world, right? This was very logical because those born in the celestial realm would already be in the shattering void tier or even stronger by birth. The majority would be able to cultivate to the Genesis tier, and this was also why the three great heavenly venerates had forbidden those from the ancient realm from entering into the celestial realm because the more living beings there were, the stronger a realm would be. As for the ancient realm, it similarly had an overall level that was higher than a small world. Though it was not as freakish as the celestial realm, most people would have reached the spiritual ocean tier by birth. Thus, considering things from this angle, the possibility that this was a small world was extremely high. Moreover, the spiritual chi here was extremely scarce, which also matched the distinctive traits of a small world. The spatial passageway had crumbled, and Ling Han had actually arrived in a small world. No wonder the Black Tower and Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire had appeared in the lower realm. After transmigrating through the void, they really would be scrambled all around the entire realm. Ling Han set this problem aside. Whether it was a small world or the ancient realm, once his injuries were recovered, returning to the celestial realm could be achieved at any moment. He continued to heal his injuries, and about 70 years passed. It seemed like something in his body had exploded. This was a shard of great Tao. Even if only a single shard had been removed, Ling Han felt his whole body grow lighter. He had finally recovered a slight bit of power. It really was just a slight bit. This progress was much faster than he had expected. He just barely managed to get to his feet, and felt his whole body sway unsteadily. Grandpa Immortal. Just coincidentally, Zhao Xin happened to come over. When he saw that Ling Han had actually stood up, he was so shocked that his eyes looked to be in danger of popping out. By now, he was already in his 30s, but he was completely focused on cultivation, and had not married yet. However, his intelligence was not like how it had been when he was younger. How could he not know that Ling Han was a supreme person of extraordinary talent? However, this amazing person had sustained severe injuries, and it was possible that he would never recover in this lifetime. Now that he suddenly saw Ling Han stand up, he was naturally dumbstruck. Ling Han smiled, yet felt an agonizing pain. No matter what actions he did now, he would feel overwhelming pain. Zhao Xin talked with Ling Han, relating his latest experiences to him, and what powerful rivals he had encountered, and just how many prodigies he had defeated. A thought came to Ling Han. Do you want to learn alchemy? Zhao Xin faltered for a moment, and then answered, yes. Thus, Ling Han began to teach Zhao Xin the art of alchemy. Unlike Ling Han's other disciples, it was much more arduous for Zhao Xin to practice alchemy because Ling Han was unable to teach him personally, and could only instruct him verbally, while Zhao Xin himself was mediocre, so understanding was extremely difficult for him. Thankfully, he was extremely resilient, and had a stubborn determination. He was willing to study, and could bear hardship. Thus, his progress in alchemy was actually not too bad, and this caused Ling Han some slight amount of surprise. After becoming an alchemist, Zhao Xin's progress through the cultivation levels became even faster. Furthermore, he had also concocted a considerable number of alchemical pills to extend the lifespan of Zhao Yulio and the others. Ling Han was recovering his injuries, while Zhao Xin was campaigning in all directions. 70 years later, he finally became a great elite of the spiritual ocean tier, and the members of the Zhao clan that were superior to him in cultivation level had more or less all passed on. It could not be helped. The effects of the alchemical pills he could concoct now were limited, and Ling Han had only removed 3 spikes of great Tao. He was far from being capable of using any mystical powers. Moreover, unless there was no other choice, he had no wish to interfere in the lives of mortals. Living long did not automatically mean happiness. It was already enough to be able to live one's lifetime well and peacefully. Zhao Xin continued his legend, but no one knew that there was an incredibly powerful celestial king standing behind Zhao Xin. Over 100 years later, Zhao Xin had married and had children of his own, having his own descendants. Chapter 2497, Zhao Xin opens the skies. Chapter 2497, Zhao Xin opens the skies. The Zhao clan was no longer the Zhao clan of days past. The present Zhao clan had now become one of the great clans of the Eternal Heartland, and their leader was a spiritual infant tier elite. It was rare to find anyone to match him. Furthermore, Zhao Xin had also chosen another well-known mountain as residence, choosing a new location for Zhao clan. However, Ling Han did not go with him, but remained at the ancestral grounds of Zhao clan in Grand Prosperity Town. Indeed, the cultivation of this small world was not flourishing. A mere spiritual infant tier was capable of reigning supreme, and there weren't any elites of the deity transformation tier, heaven tier, or shattering void tier to be found at all. Ling Han investigated thoroughly, and it was not that this place could not produce any prodigies, or like with the lower realm, a force from the ancient realm would harvest them once every 10,000 years. It was just that this place did not have enough spiritual qi, so merely spiritual infant tier was considered the pinnacle. The fact that Zhao Xin could ascend to this cultivation level in a short 100-odd years was naturally because he was capable of alchemy, which compensated for the lack in spiritual qi. And precisely because of this, he could continue to improve his strength under such extremely harsh conditions. Furthermore, his speed of advancement was also astonishing. And at this time, Ling Han had finally recovered some vitality. Through some calculations, he would need another 300 years before he could recover enough of his strength to rip open the fragile seal over the heaven and earth of this small realm. He continued to rest and recover. In any case, he had already entered into the ancient realm, so he would not be able to return to the celestial realm yet for the time being. Thus, he might as well wait until he recovered his strength to the level of ascending origin tier or celestial king tier, and then seek out the Empress and the others. He was sure that with a supreme elite like Zhu Heng standing guard, Heavenborn would have no way to play any tricks, either. At most, he would only become a first-tier heavenly venerate, and that was a matter of who knew how many years later. Ling Han kept a very low profile. In the entire Zhao clan, aside from Zhao Xin, only those that guarded the ancestral grounds knew of his existence. 200 years, 300 years. Time passed by in a flash. 300 years later, Zhao clan had already become a supreme overlord of the Eternal Heartland because Zhao Xin had already advanced into the shattering void tier. Next, he would be opening the skies so that the whole realm would rise into the ancient realm, and only that could fundamentally alter the environmental conditions of this small world. Ling Han naturally was completely unconcerned. When Zhao Xin especially brought this matter up to him for guidance, Ling Han only nodded calmly, and allowed him to make his own decisions. Zhao Xin had heard Ling Han talk of how there were many elites in the ancient realm. His strength, over there, was completely inadequate, and he could only become a subsidiary power of a strong force. There was a saying, better to reign in hell than to serve in heaven. He was enjoying a relaxed, free life here, so why should he go to the ancient realm to suffer? Senior, I have still decided to open the skies, Zhao Xin said. He could not guess Ling Han's strength, and felt that while this great man was enshrouded in an air of death, with injuries so heavy that he could die at any moment, he was still not dying. Though Ling Han had never talked of his origins, Zhao Xin was sure that he came from the ancient realm, and had been forced into dire straits by his enemy's pursuit, and that was why he had fled into the small world to escape. Though that wasn't right, it was actually already very close to the truth. The only disparity was that Ling Han did not come from the ancient realm, but rather the celestial realm. Furthermore, he was already standing at the highest tiers of the celestial realm. Ling Han declined to comment. However, if Zhao Xin really opened the skies and went into the ancient realm, Ling Han would be willing to do some things. Protecting Zhao Xin was naturally no big deal. He also wanted to do something that he had wanted to do before, but hadn't gotten around to do yet. Reuniting the immortal realm and netherworld. With his present strength, if he used himself as a core, it was completely possible that he could unite the ancient realm as one in a short period of time. Of course, this short period of time was only in relative terms. It would possibly take a few thousand years. The members of Zhao clan had varying opinions about the matter of opening the sky. Some agreed, and thought that they would have better prospects only once they went into the ancient realm, but there were some that thought it would be better not to take the risk. How great was it to be overlords here? Even if their aptitude was slightly poor, and their strength was not that great, who would dare disrespect them outside? Yet, who could persuade Zhao Xin? After preparing for 100 years, Zhao Xin had also polished his cultivation of the shattering void tear to an incredibly sturdy level. There was really no further room for advancement. Finally, he opened the skies. His aptitude was not very good. Though he had cultivated the cultivation technique that Ling Han taught him, he could only just barely be considered a prodigy. This was a very arduous venture for him, and he almost failed. It was Ling Han who had lent him a helping hand at the final crucial moment, allowing him to narrowly attain success. A hole had been created in the ancient realm, and the eternal heartland rose through this hole, entering into a wider, more expansive world. After flying in the ancient realm for 3 days, the eternal heartland arrived at a planet. It landed and integrated with it. Breathing in the far more abundant spiritual chi, along with the fact that opening the sky was a great merit, the heaven and earth bestowed blessings that bathed all of them. Instantly, quite a number of people broke through on the spot. Long live! Long live! Long live! Countless people knelt down, extremely excited. Meanwhile, Ling Han experienced the blessings bestowed by the heaven and earth. For others, this was an indescribable benefit, but for him, it was not the slightest bit useful. He lay idly. Throughout these several centuries, he could already use the regulations of time. Though he could only channel a slight sliver, for the slight sliver of a celestial king to be in this ancient realm, what kind of concept was that? To remove the shards of great Tao in my body, there is no way without a few tens of thousands of years. Ling Han sighed. He had initially thought that it would only take several thousand years, so he was disappointed, of course. Furthermore, Zhu Heng should have brought people to that transcendent dimension by now, right? Ling Han frowned. After so long of not returning, would they have thought that he had died alongside Heavenborn? He shook his head. There was no point thinking so far ahead now. He had best just focus on recovering his injuries first. Outside, Zhao Xin had successfully opened the skies, and led the great land to descend. This naturally drew the reactions of various forces of this planet immediately. They all sent out envoys, wanting to bring the eternal heartland under their authority. Looking at the many elites arriving through the air, Zhao Xin's expression became involuntarily grim. Previously, he had ruled supreme, and could find no one that could match him. But now, any elite was stronger than him, and he had a first-hand experience of just how serious the circumstances were. Become the subject of our fortunate horse nation, and your nation's security is assured. Humph, I have come as the representative of General Qi of the great youth nation. Who is the master of this nation? Come out immediately to greet me with respect. All the envoys introduced themselves respectively, and they were all extremely arrogant and overbearing. It couldn't be helped, for they all knew that the strongest in a world that had newly opened the skies and ascended could only be a shattering void tear, at most. What need was there for them to be wary? And all the cheers also ceased. Under the intimidating pressure of mountain river tier elites, everyone felt anxious, their hearts extremely heavy. This was suppression from a superior level. The mountain river tier was a height that only beings in the ancient realm could attain. Zhao Xin's expression was calm as the predictions that Ling Han had previously spoken to him about surged through his mind. He slowly said, I am Zhao Xin, the master of the eternal heartland. However, as for whichever force we should align with, I cannot make the decision, either. I have to first ask the opinion of a prominent lord. Heh! To say nothing of the fact that the various envoys were stunned, even those subjects were surprised. There was another lord. What lord? Wasn't Zhao Xin the strongest elite of the eternal heartland? All right, then let's go take a look. Haha, does he think he is all that, putting on such airs? Come, I would really like to show him what the cultivation level of mountain river tier is like. Who knows if this lord would die in fright? The envoys humphed coldly. They did not mind meeting this lord first and making fun of him before eliminating him. Come with me, Zhao Xin said. He led the way in front, bringing those envoys with him to the ancestral grounds of the Zhao clan, and did not let any other people follow suit. Chapter 2498, Get Over Here and Pay Respects. Chapter 2498, Get Over Here and Pay Respects. The envoys were all acting casual. As they saw it, what elite could there be hidden in a small world that had just newly ascended? When they arrived, they would just slightly release the aura of the mountain river tier, and just see if that so-called lord wouldn't be scared completely witless and kneel and beg to be spared. Zhao Xin's imperial palace was not too far away from the ancestral grounds of the Zhao clan, and added with how fast they were moving, they arrived at their destination in just over 2 hours' time, and this was still because Zhao Xin's speed was too slow. If they could all soar, they probably wouldn't even need an hour. Once they had arrived, Zhao Xin immediately became careful. Even if he had once been the ruler of a world, he couldn't help but think back to when he had been running around Linghan when he had been little. With a few words, the other party had taught him a supreme cultivation technique, and that was what had allowed him to stand at the height he stood at today. To him, Linghan was master, and was also a living masterpiece of cultivation that could not be studied. Seeing how Zhao Xin was behaving, all the envoys were extremely disdainful. Whom was he acting for? Did he think he could scare them just like this? Your Imperial Majesty. The people that were responsible for guarding the ancestral grounds approached, paying their respects to Zhao Xin. Zhao Xin waved a hand, signaling that they could rise, and then waved them off in dismissal. In front of mountain river tiers, numbers could not be any kind of advantage at all. It would only be a one-sided massacre. Zhao Xin strode forwards, and entered into the ancestral grounds. However, the envoys were not so well behaved. They all stood proudly in midair, and wanted to see what tricks Zhao Xin could have up his sleeve. Quickly, my time is precious, the envoy from Fortunate Horse Nation urged. Though the other envoys did not speak, impatience was clearly written on their faces. They had already played around long enough with this minor character. They really had no patience to continue these games any further. The ancestral grounds of the Zhao clan naturally wouldn't be too large. Very quickly, Zhao Xin arrived at the courtyard where Linghan was resting. Pushing open the doors, he entered, and he saw Linghan was presently sitting in a chair and sunbathing. Though close to 1,000 years had passed, Linghan's appearance still hadn't changed. His whole body was covered with wounds, and bits of bone could be seen. "Milord." Zhao Xin knelt on bent knee, greeting Linghan. Linghan had never said he would take him as a disciple, so he dared not consider himself as a disciple. Linghan made no reply, as if he had died. Anyone who had sustained such serious injuries would definitely not be far from death, and could only linger with one last breath of life. "Haha, this is that lord." The envoy from the Fortunate Horse Nation looked down from above, and couldn't help but erupt into loud, mocking laughter. The other envoys were the same. What had they seen? A mere cripple, so injured that all the bones in his body had shattered. Even his skull had caved in, his features distorted. Was this even a human anymore? "Old geezer, let me send you off on your way." The envoy from the Fortunate Horse Nation was the wildest. He shot down from midair as he delivered a palm strike straight onto Linghan's head. "How dare you!" Zhao Xin moved. Even if the gap in power was boundless, he could not help himself. Peng, his punch shot out, but the envoy from the Fortunate Horse Nation suddenly stiffened, and received a direct hit from his punch. Immediately, he stumbled backwards. And this was because the envoy from the Fortunate Horse Nation had advanced into the mountain river tier, and had also cultivated his physique to the shattering void tier. Otherwise, his head would have been crushed into mush with this one punch. Even so, his nose had still caved in, one of his eyes slanted, with blood gushing. What in the world was going on? The other envoys also paled in shock. Though the cultivation level of the Fortunate Horse Nation envoy was not too high, in the ancient realm, a mountain river tier was enough of an elite that they could establish their own force. This was a line that separated mortals from gods. Zhao Xin had not crossed over this line at all, so how was it that he could injure a mountain river tier elite with a single punch? This was incredibly strange and uncanny. Involuntarily, a chill rose up their spines. Naturally, the more they didn't understand, the more they were anxious. Could it be that there really was a lord of astonishing strength? Zhao Xin was also stunned. That was because he had never known how strong Ling Han was, and only when this punch succeeded did his heart finally calm down. The strength of Ling Han was something he could not estimate. Cao Dong, what was that just now? One of them asked the Fortunate Horse Nation envoy. He was an envoy of the Right Minister of the Golden Leopard Nation, and the Golden Leopard Nation was a majestic empire, but the Fortunate Horse Nation was a royal empire. There was a clear hierarchical difference, and he had that amount of confidence to ask this question. Cao Dong rubbed the corner of his lips. This punch had really inflicted a lot of pain on him, but it did not cause him severe injury. He spat, produced a mouthful of blood, and then said, "It was like my body stopped for a moment, then I saw a fist coming my way. I could not move at all, and was unable to dodge." Something like that actually happened? The Golden Leopard Nation envoy frowned deeply. He descended from the air with wide steps, and stopped around 30 meters away from Ling Han. Clasping his fists, he said, "I am Hu Biao, a subordinate of Lord Yin, the Right Minister of the Golden Leopard Nation. Dare I ask how I may address you, sir?" He did not dare be careless. If it had really been Ling Han who had acted previously, his strength had to be world-shaking. Thus, he immediately revealed his origins as an intimidation tactic against Ling Han. However, Ling Han did not respond. The envoys were all embarrassed. What were they supposed to do now? Should they advance or retreat? If they retreated, that would be too cowardly. They had come aggressively, yet were to flee in such a sorry manner. Furthermore, how were they supposed to answer when they returned? If they said that they had encountered a powerful foe, who was that powerful enemy then? Was it really this person who was on his last breath, or perhaps had already died, even? But if they advanced? Someone had already sustained a loss just now, and this filled all of them with extreme wariness. Who would dare make a move easily? Hence, they were stuck in a dilemma. Still, they couldn't just continue this stalemate, right? Hu Biao fixed his eyes on Ling Han. No matter how he looked at it, he felt that Ling Han was just a cripple that was so heavily injured that could no longer be treated. To say nothing of him, even a person who was just a slight bit stronger could come, and a single stomp would be enough to worsen the cripple's injuries and cause his immediate death. Could this cripple really be an elite? Hu Biao did not believe it. This thought could not be dismissed. His malice fed his courage, and he couldn't help but take a step, walking towards Ling Han. Zhao Xin immediately went on guard. The other was a mountain river tier, whose strength had surpassed his who knew how many times over. Hu Biao did not come too close. He only took a few steps, and then made an aggressive move, shooting out a punch through the air at Ling Han. This was an escape path that he had left for himself. If Ling Han was just trash, then he naturally would be able to kill both Ling Han and Zhao Xin in a single stroke with the crushing power of mountain river tier. If not, he had also reserved enough of a safe distance for himself, and he could immediately turn around and flee. It was not a bad idea, but the problem here was that the person he was presently facing was a celestial king. The power of the punch made contact, yet it froze at a visible speed, and then reversed its course. It was like space had suddenly been turned around on its head. Peng! This punch was blasted backwards at an even faster speed than it had come. Hu Biao could not even block it completely when his face sustained a heavy punch, causing him so much pain that he hurriedly gripped his face, involuntarily tearing up in pain. Seeing this scene, all the envoys naturally had no more doubt. There was indeed a great elite on guard here with Zhao Xin, though it might not be that cripple. Let's go. They turned around and fled at the same time. This rock was too hard, and there was no way that they could move it an inch. But a spine-chilling scene took place. Though their legs were moving quickly, their bodies did not move the slightest bit. This was extremely bizarre. Yet Zhao Xin leaned towards Ling Han, as if he was listening to something. Not long after, a hint of surprise appeared in his expression. However, he still declared, "All of you, listen up. After you return, tell the masters of your nations to get over here and pay their respect." Chapter 2499, Recovered. Chapter 2499, Recovered. demanding for the nation leaders to get over here and pay their respects. Hiss, this was too arrogant. All the envoys were furious. They admitted that Zhao Xin indeed had an elite on his side, and they could not afford to trifle with him, but it should be known that there were heavenly body tier overlords here. What kind of concept was that? If they went into a rage, that would be enough power to destroy a whole planet. You actually dared to trifle with such an elite? Are you guys getting lost or not? Zhao Xin rebuked harshly. When these words fell, all the envoys suddenly realized that their mobility had recovered. Suddenly losing control, they immediately rushed out. They did not dare to stop. Zhao Xin's party being arrogant was their business, and the only thing they had to do was to relay the message. In any case, judging by the present situation, they could not afford to trifle with him, so they might as well not interfere. Everyone fled swiftly, and they all disappeared very quickly. "My lord, your body." Zhao Xin looked towards Ling Han. Throughout all these years, Ling Han's condition did not improve or worsen actually, it could not become any worse. His whole body was close to rotting completely, so how much worse could it get? Ling Han sent out a message through divine sense. "I'm fine." Only he himself knew that he had already removed 29 shards of Great Tao. However, the number of shards of Great Tao in his body numbered in the thousands, so the improvement in his condition was not very apparent. In the next few days, the Eternal Heartland was unusually peaceful, as if the sky had not been opened at all. It was still a small world, and Zhao Xin alone was enough to suppress all others in this world. But everyone knew that this was the final calm before the storm, and the peace would very soon be shattered. True enough, by the 7th day, various forces arrived in quick succession. There were great generals and there were also minor generals from various nations. The great generals had been sent by smaller nations, while the minor generals were sent from greater nations, and their cultivation levels were all at the Sun-Moon tier. Since Mountain-River tiers could not deal with the problem, then they would deploy Sun-Moon tiers. Heavenly body tiers were too high and noble. How could they arrive with just a summons from Ling Han? Did he think that they were courtesans from the brothel? These elites were already terrifying enough. Without a heavenly body tier elite on guard, who could match their combined power? Thus, these people came grandly, all of them unleashing their auras without reservation. This was astonishingly frightening. Indeed, they had come to show off. The first batch of envoys had actually been frightened into fleeing in panic. No matter what, they naturally had to wash off this humiliation. They came aggressively, and went all the way to the imperial palace. Then, they began to reprove harshly, demanding that Zhao Xin come out to greet them. Going along with what Ling Han had previously said, Zhao Xin brought these people to the ancestral grounds again. "Are you bringing us to worship your ancestors?" The second batch of envoys already knew what kind of place this was, and their expressions were all livid. When they arrived, these Sun-Moon tier elites sneered. One of them moved, and struck out at these ancestral grounds. Instantly, the sun and moon revealed their brilliance simultaneously, dazzling light surging in all directions. It was like a sun and moon had fallen, dropping thunderously from the skies. This scene was a little astounding. In the celestial realm, a sun-moon tier was not worth much, but in the ancient realm, they could just manage to be ranked among elites. This definitely was not something that a sun-moon tier could do. Could it be that there was actually a heavenly body tier elite standing behind Zhao Xin? Scram! A voice filled with authority rang out in their minds, causing their minds to suddenly go blank. Their only thought was to turn around and return. Only when they returned to their respective nations did they finally come back to their senses. Involuntarily, they couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat, and almost passed out again. In the Eternal Heartland, Ling Han sent a message through divine sense to Zhao Xin. "Prepare a carriage, and bring me around all these nations." Zhao Xin did not ask what Ling Han intended to do, nor did he dare to. He merely obeyed the command and did as required. He personally took the position of coachman, and began traveling to the nations one after another based on how far away they were. Every time they reached a nation, Ling Han would have him drive the carriage directly into the imperial palace. So what if there were people obstructing them? They could not even make a single move. Ling Han had an intimate conversation with every single nation leader, and the effects were naturally obvious. These nation leaders willingly chose Zhao Xin as their common leader. All the heavenly body tier elites listened obediently. They could sense an extremely terrifying aura from Ling Han, and thought that Ling Han was a Genesis tier overlord. After dealing with all these minor problems, Ling Han continued to recover. Occasionally, he would also guide Zhao Xin, and teach him new skills of alchemy. Time passed swiftly, and 30,000 years passed in a flash. Ling Han had finally expelled the last shard of great Tao from within his body. Immediately, a frightening power surged fiercely, and boundless light shone from the ancestral grounds of the Zhao clan. In fact, even space itself had been ripped, and the celestial realm could just be seen vaguely. If he wanted to return to the celestial realm, he merely had to take a single step. Ling Han did not do this. He stood up, all the shattered bones in his body beginning to join back up again. Golden light filled the area, turning into one seal after another. Then, his flesh and skin recovered, and there was not the slightest sign of any wounds left. His injuries were very heavy, but they were mainly heavy due to the shards of great Tao. Now that the shards of great Tao had been removed, he could immediately heal his body. My grasp of the indestructible heaven scroll has actually increased a bit. Ling Han was surprised. These few tens of thousands of years, he had been battling with the shards of great Tao, and the conflict did not stop for an instant. The strongest weapon against the shards of great Tao was naturally the indestructible heaven scroll. It was being channeled at all times. The shards of great Tao were hard to get rid of, but it was also because of this that he had to find out the deepest, most profound secrets of the indestructible heaven scroll. Is this a blessing in disguise? Ling Han couldn't help but smile in spite of himself. The strength of his present physique had reached the height of the second heaven. Initially, it would have taken an ocean's worth of resources and an astounding amount of time to attain this level. The shards of great Tao can be considered a type of energy as well, but this process. Just how many could bear it? Ling Han thought back to how he would be pierced by the shards of great Tao at all these times throughout these tens of thousands of years. That kind of agony caused him to involuntarily break out in a cold sweat. I definitely do not want a second experience, he thought. Shoo. Multiple figures shot forth. They were Zhao Xin and the other great nation leaders. Ling Han would teach Zhao Xin occasionally, and afterwards one of the nation leaders came as well. Seeing that Ling Han had actually not dismissed him, and he had really been taught, the other nation leaders naturally came too. In fact, they had all moved into the ancestral grounds of the Zhao clan. Though only a few tens of thousands of years had passed, Zhao Xin's cultivation level had already reached the heavenly body tier, and there were a few veteran heavenly body tiers that would have hopes of advancing to the eternal river tier. They were filled with incredible respect towards Ling Han. When they discovered that a sudden bizarre event had happened here, they naturally all came over to investigate. "Am I, my lord?" When they saw Ling Han, everyone was dumbfounded. Their impression of Ling Han was a dying man, but what about now? His build was lanky and tall, hair flowing straight to his waist, every single strand inky black and shimmering, as if they were forged from godly metal. His skin was radiant, as if he was great Tao itself. The mere sight of him made one want to bow down in worship. "Congratulations on your recovery, my lord," Zhao Xin said immediately, his expression filled with pleasant surprise. He couldn't help but think back to his youth. Ling Han had always been severely injured, and he had finally recovered after several tens of thousands of years had passed, which made him feel rueful. Ha, a peculiar light has appeared. Could it be that a precious treasure has appeared in this place? Amidst loud laughter, another person appeared in the courtyard. He was of sturdy, tall build, and exuded a frightening air of bloodshed. Chapter 2500, Merging Two Realms. Chapter 2500, Merging Two Realms. Who was this person? None of them recognized him, yet they felt a chill rise up from the bottoms of their hearts, because not one of them knew when exactly he had appeared among them. This person. Just how strong was he? "Yi, the precious light is coming from you." This tall, sturdy man set his eyes on Ling Han, and then his gaze became harsh. Was it you that consumed the exceptional precious herb? What if I did, and what if I did not? Ling Han countered calmly. The other party's strength could not be hidden from him at all. This was a Genesis tier saint, and a great saint at that. But in his eyes, so what if he was a great saint? If you did, I will refine you into an alchemical pill, this great saint declared coldly. How dare you? Zhao Xin and the others shouted. En. The great saint glared at them, with a frightening aura spreading out, causing everyone to feel their hearts constrict, which was an indescribably terrible feeling. In front of me, what gives you people the right to speak? With a thought from him, over a dozen fists instantly rose up from the ground, barreling towards Zhao Xin and the others. A saint. Zhao Xin and the others said in shaking voices. With this attack, they could confirm who he was without a doubt. This was a saint, the strongest existence in the immortal realm, especially when a great event happened several tens of thousands of years ago. Countless saints had disappeared in unison, and there were only few that remained. Naturally, all of them were supreme beings. Peng, 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 peng. These fists had not destroyed them when they were all turned back into dust. En. This great saint's eyes widened, and he finally looked serious. Who are you, sir? He discovered that Ling Han's cultivation level was in no way inferior to his own. Ling Han. Ling Han, this great saint murmured, his brow slightly furrowed. He thought that this name was a little familiar, he seemed to have heard it somewhere before. Kneel and apologize, and I will spare your life, Ling Han stated. If this had been several tens of thousands of years ago, and someone threatened to kill him, he would definitely have killed him instead. But because his body had just recovered, he was in a good mood. Thus, he was willing to give the other party a chance of survival. That great saint flew into a great rage. He was a saint, and someone actually dared to demand him to kneel. Did he have a screw loose in his head? He couldn't be bothered to think further about who Ling Han was. Instead, he moved directly. Hong, a palm struck out, and all the stars in the skies trembled. This was the might of a saint. Ling Han had massacred the immortal realm in the past, and a great number of saints had died. There were also many saints that he had brought with him into the celestial realm. There were only a few saints that were still present. Ling Han pretended he did not see anything. However, when the attack was just about to land on his head, it all stopped, and strangely floated in midair. This scene was very grand. Countless attacks descended, as if capable of destroying worlds. In fact, it was no problem for these attacks to destroy even this planet, yet they had now all stopped, going against any rule. Hong, long, long, furious thunder rang out in the heaven and earth. This was the heaven and earth beginning to target him as it discovered that a being that was stronger than this realm had appeared. Every realm had its own rules. An existence that was too strong could not appear and damage the balance. Ling Han rebuked sharply, and pointed at the skies. Peng, the furious thunder that filled the skies instantly dispersed. He was a celestial king, and had once been the overlord of a realm himself. His level far surpassed the ancient realm. This point of his finger and a sharp rebuke possessed boundless might. Everyone was watching dumbfounded. That was a heavenly tribulation. A heavenly tribulation could actually be rebuked into retreating? That great saint's legs were shaking. Why were you come from the legendary celestial realm? His expression suddenly changed drastically as it suddenly came back to him. Ling Han. You are Ling Han. You are that Ling Han. In the past, Ling Han had killed a great many saints, and the news had spread throughout the entire immortal realm. However, there were some places that were really too far away, and who knew how much time had passed until they finally received the news. Many people did not even believe that this was true. Yet, now that the person himself had appeared to him, and his own attacks had stopped strangely, with the heavenly tribulation being rebuked into retreat. Was that not enough proof? Ling Han shook his head. I gave you a chance, but you refuse. He moved, compressing all the attacks into a sphere of light, which he then stuffed into the mouth of that great saint. With a light smack, the sphere of light was swallowed into the great saint's stomach. My lord, Spare that great saint was naturally almost shocked to death, and wanted to beg for mercy. Peng, the light sphere suddenly exploded within his body, and he was instantly turned into pieces. However, the aftermath of the explosion did not spread out, but was rather restrained in a small area. For Ling Han, this naturally was easily done. Zhao Xin and the others were all bursting with shock. They had already estimated Ling Han highly, and thought that he was a Genesis tier saint. They had not thought that even this was an underestimation. This guy was who knew how many times more awesome than any saint. Ling Han swept an eye over them, and said, "Our intertwined fates will also come to an end today." "My lord," everyone hurriedly said. Ling Han saying these words meant he was going to leave. Ling Han waved a hand. "All good things must come to an end. Work hard on your cultivation. If you can advance further, there may be a day when we will meet again." He was not the maudlin type. With a step, he had already traversed an extremely far distance. He had long since repaid the kindness that had been given to him. Furthermore, he had other affairs, so it was naturally impossible for him to stay here forever. He arrived at a connecting point between the immortal realm and netherworld. There were still battles ongoing here, and countless lower-level cultivators were fighting here, contending over great opportunities. Ling Han's figure descended, and it just so happened that the cultivators of the immortal realm and netherworld were fighting fiercely for a godly medicine. His appearance also immediately drew the attention of both sides. They both slowed their attacks so that he would not benefit from their conflict. "Do not advance any further, or we will chop off your head," a cultivator of the immortal realm shouted. Faced with great opportunities, he did not have the slightest bit of feeling that this was one of his countrymen. Ling Han ignored him, and sat down in a cross-legged position instead. He stretched out both hands, one hand communing with the immortal realm, while the other connected to the netherworld. With himself as core, he forcefully merged the two realms. Boom, a heavenly tribulation immediately came resoundingly. The two realms separated was already a fact that had existed for a great many epochs. This separation had formed a kind of energy, so how could it be so easily destroyed? In the past, it was 3 heavenly venerates that had moved, and that was how the two realms had been ripped apart, so how difficult was it? Thankfully, the two realms had originally been one and the same. The difficulty level of merging them back as one was far lower than that of splitting them apart. Thus, while this was something that only 3 heavenly venerates moving together had achieved, Ling Han alone could reverse this feat. Of course, it was not something that was instantaneous, but would require an extensive amount of time. Those cultivators that were battling discovered that there was something strange, and immediately shouted at Ling Han, "What are you doing?" Ling Han still took no heed. A monumental change was taking place in the two-realm battlefield. They had truly fused together, and the regulations of heaven and earth were changing, becoming complete. "Yi, why do I feel like I still have considerable room for improvement? My foundations are actually so unstable. I can be 10 times stronger than this." Those nearby were the earliest to benefit. The two realms joined together were the true ancient realm, so others could take that final step after reaching Genesis tier, and step into the celestial realm. It was just like how people from a small world would come into the ancient realm through opening the sky. The first feeling was that they were immediately able to break through. This kind of bizarre change immediately drew out the elites of the two-realm battlefield. They looked at Ling Han, and couldn't help but feel stunned. Who exactly was this? Furthermore, who knew what would be the end result of this kind of massive change? "Yi, why does this guy look a little like that legendary person?" Someone recognized Ling Han. After all, Ling Han had really been too powerful and aggressive in the past. Chapter 2501, Blessed by the Heaven and Earth, Third Heaven Celestial King. Chapter 2501, Blessed by the Heaven and Earth, Third Heaven Celestial King. Ling Han fused the two realms. His speed was very fast. In a short decade, he had already fused a galaxy, but in terms of the expansiveness of the ancient realm, this was just a negligible beginning. He immersed himself within, and boundless enlightenment rose up within him. The ancient realm was actually a part of the celestial realm. Using himself as core, and fusing the two realms was equivalent to becoming the overlord of a realm a second time. Amidst the change, he glimpsed the changes in the heaven and earth and the surging of that unique energy. Even a heavenly venerate could not destroy this realm. No matter how great the destruction, under this unique energy, it would still rebuild itself and nurture new life. Unless the celestial realm itself crumbled, no one could truly destroy this place. Primordial time flowed in Ling Han's body. The ancient realm had existed for as long as the celestial realm, but Ling Han could not possibly enter into the core of the celestial realm. He did not have that kind of strength, and it was too straining even for a heavenly venerate. And the present circumstances were special. 3 great heavenly venerates had split out the ancient realm, granting Ling Han an opportunity to fuse the two realms into one. This was forced by the circumstances, and the heaven and earth also had that inclination. Otherwise, the two-realm battlefield would not have appeared. This was an instinctive desire to fuse back into one. Thus, the heaven and earth could not resist Ling Han's kind offer. This benefited Ling Han. Something indestructible, everlasting was surging in his mind, allowing him to study and learn. This was a power that belonged only to the celestial realm, and was unique. Even the ancient realm had a slight bit of its mark left behind, and Ling Han continuously grasped it, turning it into his own comprehension. He was overjoyed. This kind of great opportunity was too rare. It was equivalent to 3 great heavenly venerates blessing him with good fortune simultaneously. How many people in this world could get that? He forgot all else, and immersed himself in this kind of enlightenment. He continued to fuse the two realms to obtain more of that ancient material. 100 years, 1,000 years, time passed swiftly. Ling Han forgot about time. In fact, he wanted nothing more than for this to never end. More and more people that had heard of the news came. Everyone could feel the change in the heaven and earth. The two realms were fusing, and then, there would be only one. The heaven and earth of the immortal realm no longer targeted the beings of the netherworld, and the heaven and earth of the netherworld was the same. No, the immortal realm and netherworld no longer existed. There was only one single realm, the ancient realm. Milord, milord, milord. Everyone knelt down with great respect. They could sense that the heaven and earth that they could touch was more complete, and there was a chance that they could advance into a higher level. To fuse these two realms into one, just what kind of great power was needed? This naturally filled everyone with reverence, and everyone could see the benefit of this, so how could they not feel extreme gratitude towards Ling Han? However, by now, no one could see Ling Han's true figure any longer. He was enshrouded in an incredibly ancient substance, buried deep within. Still, he still maintained the vague shape of a man sitting in a cross-legged position, but his figure became bigger and bigger. This was because Ling Han was gradually extracting more of this ancient material. Several thousand years later, this had become a sacred place. On planets who knew how far away, there would still be people coming here to visit, and bow down in gratitude towards Ling Han. But there were also some who did not believe the legend, and thought that a natural treasure had actually appeared here, and thus made a move. But it was not possible for them to even come close, as they would directly explode into dust. As the number of such cases grew, naturally, no one dared to make an attempt. They all obediently worshipped from the sidelines. 10,000 years, 30,000 years, 100,000 years. 1,000,000 years. Ling Han suddenly awakened from his enlightened state because the two realms were completely merged. In the future, there would no longer be any immortal realm or netherworld, only the ancient realm. It ended just like that. Ling Han couldn't help but purse his lips. He hadn't had enough yet. He had a feeling that the mark of the unique power of the celestial realm had been planted in his body. Even if he went into a transcendent dimension, as long as he had attained the 9th heaven celestial king tier, he could still cultivate to the heavenly venerable tier through this mark. And the transcendent dimensions would similarly possess this unique power. If Ling Han could fuse these two powers into one, then how strong would he be as a first-tier heavenly venerate? To say nothing of reaching the height of the second-tier heavenly venerate, would he be even able to sweep aside all other first-tier heavenly venerates? Thankfully he had fused the two realms only now. If he had done this when he had only been in the Genesis tier, he would definitely have wasted this great opportunity. To his shock, he discovered that his cultivation level had actually reached the peak stage of the second heaven without his knowledge. There was too much enlightenment and appreciation obtained from fusing the two realms. It had previously been mentioned that this was equivalent to the 3 heavenly venerates helping him raise his cultivation level. How could his cultivation level not progress rapidly through over 1,000,000 years' time? However, why was there no heavenly tribulation? Could it be that this was because he was helping the heaven and earth, so the heaven and earth had deliberately given him a special privilege? What a strange feeling. He had broken through, but there actually was no heavenly tribulation. Kwong, a sudden change took place in the heaven and earth. Boundless fragrance descended, enshrouding Ling Han. Ling Han's cultivation level instantly began to increase. Boundless enlightenment rose up in his mind, great Tao manifested. The celestial seed had long since grown into a giant tree, and a celestial flower had bloomed on it. Then, it rapidly wilted, bearing a single fruit. The third transformation of the celestial seed. He was going to become a third heaven celestial king. Ling Han was surprised. The heaven and earth actually bestowed great fortune on him. What good deed had he done? Hadn't Heavenborn said that he had been an unfilial child? Realization instantly dawned on Ling Han. He had fused the two realms, and this was a great contribution to the heaven and earth. Furthermore, the heaven and earth was unfeeling, and was the most just. Since he had contributed, there naturally had to be reward. Under the good fortune brought by the heaven and earth, he advanced into third heaven without a doubt. The celestial seed transformed wildly. The celestial tree had borne a fruit, and the fruit dropped, immediately sprouting, growing, and turning back once more into a celestial tree. Of course, it was just a tiny tree. It could not be helped. Though the merit of fusing the ancient realm back into one was massive, the ancient realm was only subsidiary to the celestial realm, and had limited power. Being able to push Ling Han up to the third heaven was still because he had previously already reached the peak stage of the second heaven, and so he just happened to need but a single push to send him into third heaven. Kwong, this time, the heaven and earth no longer bent the law for him. Thunderclouds gathered densely in the skies, and the heavenly tribulation was already here. This heavenly tribulation was extremely terrifying. There was not the slightest bit of weakening. In fact, it had reached the level of fourth heaven celestial king tier in battle prowess. Ling Han did not dare be careless. He hurriedly unleashed his cultivation level. Boom, celestial king tier aura surged out, instantly spreading throughout the entire ancient realm. Firstly, this was because he was too strong, and secondly, he had fused the ancient realm into one, and it was inevitable that he had also left behind a sliver of his own mark within, just like a precious tool. Thus, the transmission of his willpower was also overwhelmingly fast. Celestial king tier aura gushed out. This was a power that was invincible in the ancient realm. In fact, no one was worthy of even looking up at this kind of power. Instantly, everyone fell to their knees, trembling wildly. Boom, a massive black hole appeared, swallowing Ling Han up whole, and the tribulation clouds that filled the skies also disappeared instantly without a trace. Ling Han was too powerful, and could not be accommodated in this realm. He had to leave. Otherwise, it would either be the ancient realm that would crush him to death, or he would be bursting the ancient realm into bits. Hence, he left. Ling Han crossed over the realm barrier. As long as one's power reached the peak stage of the Genesis tier, they would be worthy of bursting through this realm barrier, and enter into the celestial realm, and Ling Han was already a third heaven celestial king by now. Just how strong had his battle prowess become? Naturally, he easily penetrated straight into the celestial realm. The scenery in front of his eyes changed suddenly. He appeared in a forest. A familiar air assailed him, and he knew that he had returned to the celestial realm. Kwong, thunder boomed alarmingly. The heavenly tribulation was hot on his tail. Ling Han laughed loudly. Come on, let me see just what level my strength has reached. Chapter 2502, The Current Circumstances. Chapter 2502, The Current Circumstances. Boom, the heavenly tribulation descended, turning into a massive, heavy sword that blazed with lightning, striking down on Ling Han. Ling Han laughed loudly, and condensed the power of regulation to meet this strike. Boom, his fists burst with light that dazzled the world as he faced the heavenly tribulation head-on. The might of the heavenly tribulation had indeed reached the fourth heaven, but Ling Han's battle prowess was even stronger. His battle prowess was directly above the middle stage of the fourth heaven, soaring close to the fifth heaven. The celestial seed was rapidly sprouting, and maturing for the third time. 3 golden celestial patterns could be clearly seen on the celestial seed, 2 of them extremely deep, while the third was extremely light, so light that it was practically invisible, but it was presently becoming deeper. When the heavenly tribulation arrived, this was the time of fastest improvement. The power of heaven and earth naturally was the most fundamental power, and was the most beneficial in terms of maturing regulations. With Ling Han bursting with endless battle cries, his fists danced like a wind as he showed not the slightest bit of fear in face of the heavenly tribulation. With a few strikes, he shattered the tribulation. This was a one-sided suppression of strength. The heavenly tribulation was already strong enough, and Ling Han was clearly undergoing a third heaven heavenly tribulation, but what had descended was at the fourth heaven. However, Ling Han was even more freakish. His battle prowess was over the middle stage of the fourth heaven, advancing towards the fifth heaven. He stimulated the celestial seed in his body to grow with all his power. This was a rare chance. In truth, his cultivation level had really increased too quickly. It was like he had suddenly surged up from the first heaven to third heaven in the blink of an eye. There would definitely be a factor of instability in his cultivation level. Hence, he planned to stabilize and strengthen his foundations and cultivation level after breaking through this time. Half a day's time soon passed. Ling Han stood firmly, a hint of a smile curling the corners of his lips. His present cultivation level had stopped at the early stage of the third heaven, and it looked like he had walked half the way. This was already extremely impressive. Where is this? Ling Han sensed the density of the spiritual qi. The difference between the Western Celestial Realm and Eastern Celestial Realm was quite wide. Western Celestial Realm, he immediately answered his own question. Then, with a movement, he flew towards the boundless seas. He was going to travel to the east, and return to the Eastern Celestial Realm to find his parents. He believed that if the Empress and the others were still in the Eastern Celestial Realm, they would definitely be waiting there for him. And if they had already left the Celestial Realm, they would definitely have left a message for him there. With how great the speed of a Celestial King was, especially for Ling Han, this kind of Celestial King that was proficient in the regulations of space, he had arrived at the coast in about half a month's time. In the past, these seas were incredibly dangerous to him, but the present he considered this a smooth journey. As long as he did not encounter any great beast of the seventh heaven Celestial King tier and above, he could face everything calmly. He began to cross the seas. There was no need for him to worry if he would barge into the lair of some powerful marine beasts. He simply advanced on a straight course. Some marine beasts did not even realize he had passed them by, and those that did were completely incapable of matching him. They could only tremble in fear, and feel thankful that Ling Han had not attacked them. However, it was not every marine creature that would act the same, after all. When Ling Han passed by an island, a golden rock shot into the skies, and set off in pursuit of him. This great rock was proficient in the regulations of space. With a flap of its wings, it had thrown a boundless distance behind it. A shrill cry rang from its beak, the sound wave reverberating, and possessing frightening destructive power. Ling Han had initially no plans to cause trouble, but after he dodged a few times, this great rock was still not willing to let him go. Involuntarily, Ling Han was also angered, and stood still. Die. When the golden-winged great rock blasted its divine sense towards Ling Han, its figure also descended sharply, its claws aiming straight for Ling Han. It was as if they were forged from divine metal, and could easily tear apart the body of a low-tier celestial king. It was a fourth heaven existence. Ling Han humphed, and drew the divine demon sword, which he lowered sharply in a slash. Pu. Blood spurted and sprayed from the golden-winged great rock. Its claws had been forcefully chopped off. It paled in shock, and only now did it know that Ling Han's tolerance of it had not been because he was outmatched, but because he had not taken it to heart at all. It hurriedly flapped its wings, wanting to flee, but how could Ling Han allow it to leave now that he was forced to fight back? He followed up with another sword strike. Another fountain of blood gushed out, and the golden-winged great rock instantly fell from the skies. However, it had not fallen too far when Ling Han had stretched out a hand and got hold of it, stowing it inside his spatial god tool. With his present strength, it was just the matter of a single thought for him to create a spatial god tool. Flying beasts were extremely delicious in the first place, what more when this was a celestial king at that? How could he allow all its flesh to go to waste? The heaven and earth grieved, a boundless shower of blood raining down, also scaring the great beasts in this area of the sea into hurriedly rushing to the depths of the great seas as they feared that Ling Han would start a massacre. Ling Han smiled faintly, and continued his journey. After all, celestial kings were not so common. Though there were a considerable number of celestial kings in the boundless seas, the latter themselves were overwhelmingly huge. Just how high were the chances of Ling Han just happening to pass by the lair of a great celestial king-tier beast? Another month later, he had crossed the boundless seas, and set foot on the soil of the eastern celestial realm. He discerned the directions slightly, and then continued advancing. 8 days later, he arrived at where his parents were. He felt a little anxious. After all, too much time had really elapsed this time round. He feared he would witness a scene that would break his heart. He arrived, and called out loudly, "Father, Mother, hey, what are you shouting for?" There were guards here, and they immediately rebuked him sharply. "Are you an idiot? Coming here and calling father and mother?" One of the guards laughed. Why does this guy look a little familiar?" "Lord Ling Han." He had been recognized, and someone immediately went off to report his arrival. Now, it had become lively. His parents, uncle, eldest and third brother, and Liu Yutong and the other women all surged forth to greet him. Seeing that Ling Han was fine, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Though they all firmly believed that Ling Han would definitely be fine, they would still feel anxious and could not rest easy unless they saw him with their own eyes. Ling Han briefly related his experiences. Though over 1,000,000 years had passed, he had not done many things, so speaking of his experiences was just the matter of a few words. However, the experiences of the others were much more varied. Next, they naturally talked about the Empress and the others. Zhu Heng had deliberately waited for Ling Han another few thousand years. In fact, he had even used his methods to search for him. However, this was the celestial realm, after all. He could not unleash his full abilities, fearing that he would cause this realm to burst in a moment of carelessness. Thus, he had not found Ling Han, and could only take the others with him and make an advanced departure. The Empress, Hu Niu, bewitching Maiden Ru, the Rain Emperor, and the others had all left. As long as they had the aptitude of a monarch tier, it was fine. In a transcendent dimension, even a monarch tier would have a sliver of hope of becoming a heavenly venerate. Of course, the chance of this happening was pitifully low. It might be that not even one would succeed out of 100 million, but there was still hope, after all. What surprised Ling Han was the fact that Heavenborn was actually included. This guy had caused a massacre, and at least over 10,000 celestial kings had died by his hand, and they actually allowed him to go into the transcendent dimension. It was said that Heavenborn's aptitude is too great, and there are very high hopes that he could become a heavenly venerate in the future, Feng Po-yun explained. This naturally was not something that he had heard from Zhu Heng, but rather a message relayed by the Empress and the others. Ling Han frowned. It looked like the war situation in the transcendent dimension was extremely tense. Otherwise, they would not have brought even such a bringer of slaughter like Heavenborn with them. Only heavenly venerable tier could resist hysteria. The difference was that a 7th tier heavenly venerate was absolutely the main force, while a 1st tier heavenly venerate could only help here and there, but no matter how minor their role, they could still be of some use, at the very least. This is the dimensional transfer seal that Lord Zhu has left for you. Feng Po-yun handed over a jade seal. It looked to be completely average, and did not seem to be anything special. Lord Ju has said that as long as you activate it with Celestial King tier power, you can send around 10 people into the transcendent dimension. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.